Chapter 1899 Living on Someone, while helping others secretly. Chapter 1899 Living on Someone, while helping others secretly. Ba Yao looked at Ling Han, his voice harsh and severe. His black locks suddenly danced, each strand entwined with blue-colored lightning, cracking and popping loudly, incredibly powerful. Boom! The unique pressure belonging to an ascending origin tier elite attacked as if a divine dragon appeared, wherein mortals could only bow in reverence. Even alchemist Xi Qing had not expected that Ba Yao would make a move in public. Though he moved to block the assault with an angry humph, there was really a considerable gap between his strength as compared with Ba Yao, so how could he make it in time? His heart grew very anxious. If a holy son was to kneel to another in public, how would he be able to face others in future? If this spread out in future, others would not be concerned with whom Ling Han had knelt down to, or why he had knelt. They would only say that Ling Han was as timid as a mouse. He was clearly in Alchemy City, and there were 4 great alchemists by his side at that, yet he still spinelessly begged for mercy from an outsider. No matter how prodigious you were, so what? You would be directly besmirched to the bone. This was too sinister. Lu Jing! Alchemist Xi Qing thought in his heart. If this kind of thing had really happened, then he would guarantee that there was no possibility for Lu Xianming to ascend to the position. He was sure that Ba Yao must have come through a collusion with Lu Jing. This was a series of moves. Using the stakes of giving his agreement on Ling Han becoming a holy son, forcing him to proclaim that the heir would be selected after 3 years, and then directly forcing Ling Han out of the running. Next, Lu Xianming would practically be sure of victory. With a master like this, it was clear what his disciple's nature was like. If Lu Xianming were to take the seat of chairperson, the atmosphere of Alchemy City would definitely be turned foul by this master and disciple in future. Boom! An indescribably terrifying chi rippled out. All severing mundane tiers in the area felt their knees become weak. In fact, some dividing soul tier elites couldn't bear it either. Ba Yao was really too powerful. The fact that he was acclaimed as the top elite of the ascending origin tier might be a little exaggerated, but his strength definitely allowed him to claim an imposing position in this cultivation level. How could Ling Han resist that? Fu Gaoyun, Fu Xiaoyun, and a few other old acquaintances all showed a hint of worry. They were standing so far, and were not the main target of attack either, but still felt their knees become very weak. How could Ling Han possibly hold up to this? And Qianzhao clan, Beiyu clan, and other such forces all smirked coldly, wanting nothing more than for Ling Han to be utterly shamed. Now that Ling Han had ascended to become the holy son of a 4-star force, and further when Alchemy City was the strongest inheritance beneath the Celestial King tier, even if the ancestor of a 3-star force came, they would have to be polite when they met Ling Han. Naturally, there was no further mention of getting vengeance. But how could enmity and animosity be so easily forgotten? Now that someone could give Ling Han a little bit of suffering, they were naturally pleased to see it happen. Amidst a furious roar, alchemist Xi Qing finally stood in front of Ling Han, but it was already too late. What? Everyone was astonished. Ling Han was still proudly standing erect. His knees had not weakened, and he had not knelt. How is this possible? The aura of Ba Yao alone was definitely capable of crushing a mere severing mundane tier with a difference of so many cultivation levels, even if you were a king among kings, or even a monarch tier. You definitely are not human. Ling Han was naturally human, but there were 2 source powers of heaven and earth inside his body, and they were essentially existences comparable to celestial kings. You, a mere ascending origin tier, actually wanted to force a celestial king to kneel. You got to be joking, right? Of course, this was because of the crucial fact that Ba Yao had only used his aura. If he added a sliver of power of regulation or force, he would definitely be able to kill Ling Han a considerable number of times with a single thought. Ba Yao, you have gone too far! Grandmaster Chu Yi declared coldly. Though Ling Han was not his disciple, he was the holy son of Alchemy City. For an outsider to make a move on Ling Han, it was no different than making a move on Alchemy City directly. This naturally had exceeded Grandmaster Chu Yi's limits. Yet Ba Yao was completely indifferent. He was too powerful. Even if all the ascending origin tiers in Alchemy City joined forces, he could still leave calmly. Furthermore, just with the fact that he was from Thundercloud Palace, what did these people dare to do? At worst, they could only banish him from the city. Brat, there seems to be something in your body. He fixed his gaze on Ling Han, his eyes growing slightly brighter. When one had reached the cultivation level he had reached, there were practically not many secrets that could be hidden from him. If it was claimed that Ling Han could resist his aura with his own effort, there was no way he would believe that. And what object could block his pressure? It was definitely a precious treasure that was at least Celestial King tier level. What business is it of yours? Ling Han declared coldly. This person actually dared to make a move on him, being extremely shameless. He naturally couldn't be bothered to address the other party as senior again. Humph, to be so rude even to an ascending origin tier elite. With your character, how can you become a holy son of Alchemy City? Lu Jin suddenly spoke up, his expression filled with disdain. You old bastard, have you gone blind? Didn't he see that it was Bai Yao who made the first move so completely shamelessly? And now he actually said he was being rude. Ling Han felt rage fill his heart, and couldn't help but mockingly say, Grandmaster Lu, could it be that you share the same pants with this demon? The two of you are a truly loving couple, with such good marital harmony. Pooh! Hearing these words, a considerable number of people spluttered into laughter, and felt this was completely unimaginable. Ling Han was really awesome. In terms of cultivation, he was only a mere fourth severance, yet had offended a king tier of the ascending origin tier. In alchemy, he had just become a one-star alchemist, yet dared to insult a four-star alchemist right to his face. They had never seen someone as willful as he. The heavenly phoenix divine maiden was worried to death, while the empress was proud. This was what her husband should be like, mighty and bowing to no one. Bewitching maiden Ro also felt very captivated, her eyes glowing. No matter how strong a woman was, she would have heroic dreams, hoping to encounter a man with a metal that rose above the heavens. At least in this moment, Ling Han had deeply touched her heart. Bai Yao actually was not angered. He only looked at Ling Han smilingly, the light in his eyes slightly frightening, yet Lu Jin was almost half dead with fury. He had just become a four-star alchemist, filled with high spirits, yet a minor alchemist had actually rained down insults on him. This, how could he not be furious? You are courting death! He yelled, even his voice a little high-pitched. What is it? Can't you be insulted? Alchemist Zi Cheng's face was filled with thunderous fury. Who do you think you are? Think you can fly just because others give you some face? So what if you are a four-star alchemist? You aren't even worthy of picking up my shoes. If it was not for taking the big picture into consideration, you wouldn't be even worthy of acting proud in front of me. And you actually dared to threaten me? This bastard, I have tolerated you for very long. Lu Jin couldn't speak coherently with how furious he was. Though Ling Han's words were hurtful, he was only a holy son, after all, and did not have much weight to his words, but it was a different case for alchemist Zi Qing. However, he had not exaggerated. The three disciples of Grandmaster Zi Qing that had been cast out were all four-star alchemists. Who could compare to that accomplishment? Previously, Lu Jin could use the matter of Ling Han ascending to become a holy son to restrain alchemist Zi Qing, and force him to compromise, but he could not do so now. To establish a holy son, the agreement of all the four-star alchemists had to be attained, but to depose a holy son, that was similarly the case. He no longer had the stakes to threaten alchemist Zi Qing. As an alchemist of Alchemy City, you live in the city, yet help outsiders in secret, being even less than a dog. Grandmaster Zi Qing berated to his heart's content, making Lu Jin's face pale as well. The damage caused by these words was extraordinarily serious. If Lu Jin could not wash this blight from his name, then the label of a traitor would be forever stuck on him. I make the suggestion for this person to be banished. Grandmaster Zi Qing pointed at Lu Jin, his expression sinister. Previously he had borne with it, all because he was taking the big picture of Alchemy City into consideration. A 4-star alchemist indeed had strong influence, but for his own selfish desires, he actually colluded with an outsider to bully one of his own. That had surpassed Grandmaster Zi Cheng's limits of toleration. You think I do not dare to make a move on you, or I can't? How naive! Chapter 1900 An Aggressive Counter. Chapter 1900 An Aggressive Counter. Don't even think about it! Completely flustered, Lu Jin suddenly jumped up, pointing a finger at Grandmaster Zi Qing. If he really was exiled from Alchemy City, that would become an eternal stain that would never be washed away. He would be jeered and laughed at wherever he went. Alchemist Zi Qing ignored him completely, and only looked towards Grandmaster Chu Yi and Grandmaster Wen Tian. What do the two of you say? His expression was filled with austere eyes, his air overbearing, having an indescribable domineering aura. Who said that he was only versed in alchemy? Everyone was overwhelmed by Grandmaster Zi Cheng's aura, and felt their hearts tremble as their scalps grew numb. Grandmaster Zi Qing was really bold to proclaim discarding a 4-star alchemist just like that. It should be known that on the surface, there were only 4 4-star alchemists in the entire Eastern Celestial Realm, and every one of them was an influential supreme existence that could affect a whole region. Brother Zi Qing, you are the chairperson of Alchemy City, so it is natural that whatever you say goes. Grandmaster Chu Yi took a sip of wine, appearing to be very unperturbed. However, he added, Alchemy City has always had only 3 4-star alchemists, and that was fine. What he implied was agreement. Having us 3 4-star alchemists was enough, and there was no need for a treacherous guy like this. Grandmaster Wen Tian, meanwhile, was expressionless. He was an unusual character, and thought about things in a way different from the norm. He replied, Agreed. Aside from new alchemical pills, there were not many matters that could capture his interest. Whether there was another 4-star alchemist or one less, so what? He did not care. Hearing the verbal exchange between these 3, everyone felt their mouths twitch, unable to believe what they were hearing. A 4-star alchemist had actually been discharged with just a few words like that. This was practically like it was just a trifling matter. Scram! Grandmaster Zi Qing pointed at Lu Jin. This time, he was really angered. To actually dare have ideas about his own disciple. It caused this old geezer's temper to completely explode. You cannot exile me! I am a 4-star alchemist! Lu Jin's face was completely pale as he loudly called out. You are using your public office to avenge a private grudge! I do not yield! I don't yield! I won't yield! So what if you won't yield? Grandmaster Zi Qing scoffed. So what if I am using my public office to avenge a private grudge? He countered with 2 consecutive questions, striking Lu Jin speechless, making his face astonishingly pallid. Grandmaster Zi Cheng's status in alchemy was really too high. In the past, even a minor alchemy apprentice of his had been able to rampage around an alchemy city without any reservation, not taking even a 3-star alchemist seriously. Then, Grandmaster Zi Qing was naturally even more powerful. Merely in the case of 4-star alchemists, he had nurtured 3 of them. What kind of accomplishment was that? In the world of alchemy, Grandmaster Zi Qing was a massive tree that stretched up to the heavens. If it was not for the fact that he lacked a bit of luck, he could even have a chance of becoming a 5-star alchemist. I have to say a word of justice here. Ba Yao interrupted. The Thundercloud Palace had a secret deal with Lu Jin. The Thundercloud Palace would fully assist Lu Jin's branch to ascend to the position of chairperson of Alchemy City, and as repayment, Alchemy City would provide the Thundercloud Palace with a great volume of alchemical pills for free or a very favorable price every year. As for dealing with Ling Han, that was only something to be done while they were at it, just a minor suppression. Who would have expected that this suppression would actually incite such a strong backlash from Grandmaster Zi Qing? How could a noble 4-star alchemist be discharged so easily? Ba Yao asked solemnly. Who do you think you are? What right do you have to speak here? Alchemist Zi Qing immediately pointed a finger at Ba Yao, his contempt indescribable. Who was Zi Qing? As the king of 4-star alchemists, from a certain aspect, he could be considered a celestial king himself. No matter how invincible you, Ba Yao, are in the ascending origin tier, can you be considered a celestial king? You can't? Then shut your mouth. What right do you have to interrupt me? Scram! Alchemist Ziqing shouted. Ling Han's heart rippled. So as it turned out, this master might be a money grubber, but beneath that, he had hidden such a domineering facet to his character. It was just that he usually had no need to be so overbearing that he could override everything. And now that he had been angered, he had finally exploded. He was also very touched. Grandmaster Ziqing had risen in fury because of him. Otherwise, Ba Yao was ultimately a member of a celestial king tier level sect, and he himself was an ascending origin tier elite, so how could he be easily insulted? Ba Yao's expression turned cold, and he declared, Grandmaster Ziqing, please be more polite with your words. I will allow you 3 breaths' time to scram. Otherwise, I will spare no expense to rally all the elites in this world to begin hunting you down, right until you are dead. Grandmaster Ziqing declared menacingly. If you don't believe me, you can give it a try. When these words were spoken, Ba Yao's aura was suddenly completely suppressed. Invincible in the ascending origin tier? Hee, that was just empty words. Among ascending origin tier level forces, a king tier of the ascending origin tier like him was indeed capable of being invincible. But the Thundercloud Palace was not the only celestial king tier level force in this world. How could it be that the other celestial king tier level sects did not have holy sons and holy daughters of the last generation who had cultivated to the ascending origin tier, and could not break through even with much effort, but had tempered their power to become incredibly strong in the ascending origin tier? A 4-star alchemist sparing no expense definitely could take out something that would tempt these elites out, and by then, he would really be in danger. The Thundercloud Palace was only a first heaven celestial king tier level force, and the Eastern Celestial Realm had second heaven and third heaven, fourth heaven, and even eighth heaven celestial king tier level forces. So what if he was killed? How could it be that the Thundercloud Celestial King would seek them out for revenge? Just like with that person from the Rock Palace. So what if you were a person that had walked out from the Thundercloud Palace and Zai clan? You would still be directly killed without hesitation. As long as your background was powerful enough, you could be confident enough. When you made a move, you would definitely not be merciful in the slightest. 1. Grandmaster Ziqing began counting down, his gaze sinister. 2. Ba Yao's expression changed drastically. Ultimately, he did not dare take a gamble on Grandmaster Ziqing's determination. With a humph and a leap, he had already flown back to the warship in the skies. Grandmaster Ziqing did not cast him a second look, and turned to look at Lu Jin. You can get lost too. No, you can't do this. I am a 4-star alchemist. I am a 4-star alchemist. Lu Jin shouted loudly, slightly hysterical. With a wave of his sleeve, Grandmaster Ziqing said, Brother Gu, Brother Chang, Brother Zhao, cast this person out. Immediately, 3 ascending origin tier elites walked out. Aside from alchemists, there were similarly cultivators as well in Alchemy City. They were the pillars of strength that truly protected Alchemy City. As for alchemists, they would definitely be spending the majority of their time on alchemy. Brother Lu, please. These 3 people said to Lu Jin, their faces expressionless. When Lu Jin saw this, he knew that there was no turning back in this matter. His hands involuntarily balled into fists, and his heart was filled with regret. Why didn't he quit while he was ahead? Previously, he completely had the upper hand, yet had greedily attempted to follow up and press his attack home. In the end, a heavy blow landed right on top of him. Not only had he lost all his advantageous position, he had in fact lost completely. Only now did he know just how far the gap was between himself and Grandmaster Ziqing. He could not become his equal just by being a 4-star alchemist like him. How regretful he was of his past deeds. He sighed, turned, and left. His posture was stooped and filled with a despondent air, a completely different picture from how high-spirited he had once been. Everyone gasped in shock. Everything had changed really too quickly. At the beginning, Merely Lu Jin alone had forced Grandmaster Ziqing into a continuous retreat, compelling him to make various compromises. In the end, a strong helper like Ba Yao had come, yet it had instead blown the bugle horn for the beginning of Grandmaster Ziqing's counterattack. This was probably what they called life being inconstant and prone to change. Grandmaster Ziqing swept an eye over the gathered holy sons and holy daughters, and saw Lu Xianming was presently trembling in fear. He calmly said, 3 years later, the selection for the heir will continue as planned. Chapter 1901 Practicing Hard. Chapter 1901 Practicing Hard. What? Everyone was baffled, and could not understand. Why? Previously, Grandmaster Ziqing had clearly been compelled to compromise, and agreed to hold the selection for heir 3 years later, but now Lu Jin was clearly dealt with, and added with Grandmaster Ziqing's present domineering attitude, even if he declared that Ling Han was to directly ascend to the position, there were probably not many people that dared to raise objections. Even if he did not do that, he could make some changes, and push this time limit backwards, such as 10,000 years, or 100,000 years later. For the others, this time was not long, yet it could allow Ling Han enough time to develop and grow. Why was he still maintaining the original decision? This was the difference between Grandmaster Ziqing and Lu Jin. He would keep his word. Everyone was filled with admiration towards Grandmaster Ziqing. It was no wonder he could sit in the position of chairperson for so long. Everyone admired him, and merely from this aspect, even Lu Jin had no hope of catching up to him. Ling Han looked towards Grandmaster Ziqing, and saw that the old geezer bore a mysterious smile on his face. He knew that this was Grandmaster Ziqing adding pressure and motivation onto his shoulders. But everyone had an overly perfect view of Grandmaster Ziqing. Ling Han could easily guess. If he still had not reached the height of Lu Xianming and the others after 3 years, alchemist Ziqing would indeed begin the selection for the heir. However, this selection could last for 1 or 2 years, and could also last for 8 to 10 years, or even a few million years. Who said that he had to decide instantly when he made the selection? He had been alive for billions of years, so how crafty and wily was he? No, how astute and circumspect was he? Lu Xianming sighed in relief. He had been worried that he, too, would face accounting, but unexpectedly not only was he safe, the selection for heir 3 years later would still progress as planned. He definitely, absolutely would defeat everyone else 3 years later, and return in boundless glory. As for now, he just had to keep a low profile. Even if someone stepped on his face, he could not react. He could not allow others to capture the slightest bit of chance to deal with him to avoid losing the right to contest. Yet he had thought too much. Whether it was alchemist Ziqing or Ling Han, they had never taken him to heart before. Continue! Grandmaster Ziqing waved a hand, and sat back down. He closed his eyes like he was a weary old man. But who would dare to underestimate him? He had sent a king tier of ascending origin tier away, and exiled a 4-star alchemist. Just how domineering without compare was this? The ceremony began. One after another, the representatives of 3-star forces and 4-star forces took their turns to approach to express their congratulations for Ling Han, as well as offer heavy gifts. At first, there were not so many, but seeing how Grandmaster Ziqing doted on Ling Han, they added a considerable number at the last moment. Ling Han was not reserved, and accepted all he was given. The more the better. This caused Grandmaster Ziqing, who occasionally swept a glance over him, to feel incredibly gratified. His little disciple really had his bearing, valuing wealth as much as his own life. Good, very good. First, it was 4-star forces, and they were followed by 3-star forces. Those like the representatives of Lunar Sect and Beiyu clan all offered their congratulations, and gave rich gifts to Ling Han, but the expressions on their faces were naturally incredibly awkward. To deliver gifts and congratulate their enemy, and they had to be all smiles at that. This really made them feel awkward. But what could be done? He was the holy son of a 4-star force, and he could simply send out any ascending origin tier elite, and that would be enough to conquer them. Their only hope was that Ling Han could forget past events. You guys can prepare some more godly metal. I am a very forgetful person, Ling Han said, smiling slightly. The representative of the lunar sect and the others were all dumbfounded. Who would have thought that Ling Han would actually blackmail them in public? Thankfully. As long as you were willing to demand benefits, grudges were easily resolved. Furthermore, godly metal wasn't anything too valuable. Pseudo-divine metal was truly priceless, and divine metal was really exorbitant. There were not even many celestial kings that could take that out. The status of the Fu clan was comparatively too low. Their turn came at the very end, and only then were they allowed to offer their congratulations. Holy Sun Ling, congratulations! Fu Gaoyuan bowed deeply, his heart feeling incredibly rueful. Ling Han was really too amazing. Meanwhile, Fu Xiaoyun looked dejected. When Ling Han and the Fu clan had turned hostile, it was already determined that there was absolutely no possibility for anything to develop between them. Ling Han deliberately conversed a while longer with Fu Gaoyuan, giving him enough face. As expected, when Fu Gaoyuan stepped back, a considerable number of people gathered around and asked him all sorts of questions. They were all probing into his relations with Ling Han. Being able to become a friend of this popular holy son, he was naturally worth enticing. In this way, it should be practically a sure thing that Fu Gaoyuan would inherit the position of clan leader for the Fu clan in future. To friends, Ling Han had always been selfless. If he could help them, he would do all he could. Situ Xiaozhen walked over, her expression filled with strong curiosity. Your $8. Stop! Ling Han hurriedly interrupted her. I'm perfectly fine, and there is no need for you to worry about me. Che, being so secretive, you must be guilty of something. Situ Xiaozhen mumbled, yet Situ Tang pulled her to one side. Xian Yan also gave Ling Han a few words of encouragement. In the past, he had thought highly of Ling Han, but never could have imagined that Ling Han could become the holy son of Alchemy City one day, which made him feel very rueful. The ceremony lasted for 3 days, and Ling Han was tired from receiving the many gifts he had been given. After this ended, Ling Han immediately had the divine demon sword swallow all the godly metal. Unfortunately, it was still not enough to push the divine demon sword into the level of 4-star pseudo-divine metal. He and the Empress both began their seclusion. They all had the same goal, and that was to reach the peak stage of 4th severance first, and then break through to the 5th severance. Furthermore, Ling Han had another task, and that was to become a 2-star alchemist within 3 years, and try as hard as he could to reach 3rd refinement in his spirit refinement. In that way, he would not be the slightest bit inferior to the other holy sons and holy daughters anymore, and it would be clear whose spirit refinement had higher standards by then. Ling Han first entered into the Black Tower, and began comprehending the 2-star pill recipe underneath the reincarnation tree. This had taken him 30,000 years. And then he entered into the time cultivation chamber to proceed on concocting alchemical pills. Occasionally, he would ask for guidance from alchemist Ziqing, and because his improvement was rapid, Grandmaster Ziqing would treat him with care every time. This little disciple of his really could possibly become a 2-star alchemist 3 years later. Then, he would not need to play any more tricks. He really could immediately select the heir, while he himself could retreat in peace, where he could concoct alchemical pills and teach disciples. That was right. He would have to let his little disciple have a few more children. He wanted to develop even more outstanding alchemists. Taking advantage of the fact that Ling Han was in seclusion, he began to choose a consort for Ling Han. She definitely had to have a certain skill at alchemy. In this way, with the combination of the bloodlines of both father and mother, only would it be possible to have children that surpassed their parents. Ling Han naturally knew nothing of this. Otherwise, it was possible that he would flee out of Alchemy City. Inside the Black Tower, time flew by underneath the reincarnation tree. When 2.5 years had passed in the outside world, Ling Han finally succeeded, and concocted his first 2-star celestial pill. After informing Grandmaster Ziqing, he did not stop, and immediately began his spirit refinement. 2nd refinement, this was the target that he had to reach. He did not neglect his cultivation either. Grandmaster Ziqing was incredibly concerned about this little disciple of his, and bombarded him with cultivation resources like they were worth nothing. He did not use the resources of Alchemy City. The majority of it came from Grandmaster Ziqing's own private pocket. It should be known that Grandmaster Ziqing really had a good acumen for making money. As he was a 4-star Grandmaster, added with the accumulation of wealth over so many years, his wealth was unimaginable. And this had pushed Ling Han all the way to 4th Severance late stage. The Empress had reached the 4th Severance peak stage because she only had to focus on cultivation, but to break through to the 5th Severance was not something possible by just working hard on cultivation. A turning point was needed. And right at this time, a messenger arrived at Alchemy City. Chapter 1902 Yan Xianlu's Invitation. Chapter 1902 Yan Xianlu's Invitation. This messenger came from the Eternal Prosperity sect. When he came, it just happened to be the time that Ling Han would come out of seclusion after 3 days, which could be considered very coincidental. Because the name of the Eternal Prosperity sect was too famous, this messenger was allocated to stay 3 days on the 4th level. The moment Ling Han came out of seclusion, someone immediately went to inform him, and Ling Han temporarily had no plans of beginning the next step of seclusion, though he really couldn't be bothered to meet anyone at this time. After a while, a young man appeared. He was dressed in black robes, and was in the 4th Severance, possessing a forceful heroic spirit. He was just a messenger, yet had the bearing of a king tier, which was proof of what kind of talent was under the command of Yan Xianlu. "You really are putting on airs, actually making me wait for 3 days." When this black-robed young man spotted Ling Han, he immediately showed an expression of displeasure. "Heh!" Ling Han mocked in his heart, and pointed at the doors as he said, "The doors are there. You can get lost now." The young man faltered involuntarily. He had not thought that Ling Han would be so direct and domineering. His face flushed red, and turned green in the next instant. After a while, he finally said, "Ling Han, I have come under the command of the Lord Holy Sun." "Oh, which Holy Sun?" Ling Han asked indifferently. "Of course it is Holy Sun Yan Xianlu," the young man declared proudly. "Aside from my lord, who else in the Eternal Prosperity sect is worthy of the title of Holy Sun?" This boast was quite exaggerated, but it was also proof of how powerful Yan Xianlu was, as he actually didn't even have a single rival. "What is Yan Xianlu looking for me for?" Ling Han crossed his legs, as if he had not heard clearly the words Yan Xianlu. The young man inhaled sharply, and stared fixedly at Ling Han, looking stunned. "How outrageously bold are you to actually dare call Yan Xianlu's name directly?" He couldn't help but rebuke. "How dare you? How can the Holy Sun's name be called out directly by someone like you?" Ling Han sneered and said, "You came to my territory, and are planning to teach me how to behave?" The young man had a slight desire to make a move, but when he thought of Ling Han's grand feats in the past, he immediately dispensed with the thought. He was indeed a king tier, but compared to Zhao Qifeng, he was inferior by who knew how much, and even Zhao Qifeng had been killed by Ling Han, so what was he worth then? If he made a move, that would only be delivering his head up on a silver platter. "Humph! When you see my lord, you will know just how big the gap is between you and Lord Holy Sun," the young man said proudly. He took out a letter, and flicked it over to Ling Han. "My lord invites you for a meeting." Ling Han took the letter, but did not immediately open it. "A year later, the gathering of prodigies at Broken Clouds Mountain," the young man said, his expression filled with arrogance. "Ling Han, do you know that all those that could be invited by my lord are holy sons of celestial king to level sects? You are the only exception. The details of the time and venue are all written in the letter, but first you have to be able to see it." He paused, and then continued, "This is written personally by my lord." "Written personally by Yan Xianlu?" At first, Ling Han was unconcerned, but now he was interested, and began to open the letter. There was a seal on top, representing that the envelope was untouched. When this seal was broken open, a frighteningly sharp chi was transmitted from within the envelope, as if it was capable of slicing the heavens apart. So powerful! Ling Han's heart clenched. When Xianlu wrote, he had to have left his martial intent on the letter, and now the details of the time and venue were all in the letter. Only those who could see it could set out there. This was a test. I, Xianlu, had already invited you, but were you worthy of coming? Wang, a boundless majestic light surged out, and the house was immediately filled with patterns of great Tao, as if a supreme elite was about to charge out of the letter and give Ling Han a fatal strike. A solemn expression spread across Ling Han's face, but the movements of his hands did not stop in the slightest as he continued to open the letter. That young man, though, could no longer bear it. He retreated continuously, and a sliver of admiration spread across his expression. Ling Han, who was bearing the brunt of it, looked completely fine, while he retreated continuously. It was clear how wide the gap was between the two of them. No wonder he could kill Zhao Qifeng, and managed to be personally invited by the Holy Sun. However, you have only opened the envelope, and have not yet unfolded the letter. That is the true test. He watched quietly from the sidelines, and saw that Ling Han had already drawn out the letter that was inside. It had been folded 4 times over, and was quite thin. Ling Han continued to open the letter. 1. A golden light surged out, turning into a golden divine sword that struck out at Ling Han, and Ling Han casually extinguished it with a squeeze of his hand. He opened it again, and a green-colored precious saber slashed out. He lowered his hand again, and the precious saber dispersed from his strike. At this time, the letter was completely unfolded. Wang, an endless black halo surged out, turning into a fist filled with disdain for the whole world that struck out at Ling Han. One punch could shatter the heavens, suppress eternity, and dictate over the universe. Domineering and extremely proud. This was Xianlu's Tao, exuding endlessly with his conviction. Ling Han also shot out a punch. This was an unusual contest between the two of them. He could not depend on treasures like the divine demon sword, or he would fall into a disadvantage, and it would also cause his ambition for invincibility to waver. Pun! The two fists clashed. Ling Han's figure trembled slightly. He took 3 steps back, stopped, and then took another 7 steps back before he finally steadied his footing. And there were 10 footprints as deep as half a foot left clearly on the tiles beneath his feet. That black fist also shattered abruptly, and turned back into a black halo, which then formed words. 3 Yam Peak, when the 3 stars align. These words only appeared for an instant before shattering abruptly, and turning into nothing. Ling Han, the letter was already delivered. I will take my leave now, the young man said, a hint of admiration in his expression. To be able to sustain a strike from Lord Holy Sun, this strength was truly powerful. Of course, compared with Lord Holy Sun, he wasn't even worthy of picking up his shoes. It should be known that when the Holy Sun wrote the letter, it had only been done carelessly, and Ling Han had still taken 10 steps back, using his full effort. The comparison in strength could not be any clearer. Ling Han ignored him. He looked at that letter. Because Xianlu's martial intent had already seeped out completely, the letter had also become completely blank. If he could not sustain that punch, he would only see a blank letter. This was also where Xianlu was domineering. I would invite you, but were you worthy? A calm smile appeared on Ling Han's face, while the fighting spirit in his eyes blazed. To be honest, he was indeed no match for Xianlu at present. Merely from that punch previously, he already knew that Xianlu had definitely advanced into the 5th severance. Otherwise, he could not have that kind of power that could crush everything. If this was not just a letter that just bore a sliver of Xianlu's martial intent, but was rather a direct punch, then Ling Han would at least be throwing up a mouthful of blood. There is another year. I must break through to 5th severance, Ling Han mumbled. He had already decided that he would go. Perhaps Xianlu can give me enough pressure, allowing me to gain an opportunity to push open the doors to the 5th severance. The heavenly Tao Jade was not all-purpose. It only increased that slight sliver of hope for him. The crux of the matter was still on him. However, the priority now is to attain second refinement. Half a year later, I will really be put to the test. Xianlu's matter should be set aside first. Ling Han rubbed his chin, feeling that his time had really been filled to the brim, and there was not enough to use at all. Chapter 1903 Selection begins. Chapter 1903 Selection begins. Ling Han continued his path of alchemy. His talent in alchemy was truly astonishing, and added with the fact that he had this kind of source power of wood like the reincarnation tree, he could have a few hundred times more time for appreciation as compared to others. A mere 5 months had passed, and he had already reached second refinement. The quality of this second refinement of mind should be good enough. Ling Han looked at the celestial pill that he had just concocted in his hand, a smile appearing on his face. 2 golden lines, one deeper and the other lighter, possessing an imposing air that could not be described. As his abilities in alchemy advanced into the level of a 2-star alchemist and second refinement, his skill in first refinement also greatly improved. Though he still could not compare to alchemist Ziqing, the gap between them would not be astonishingly huge. It should be known that Grand Master Ziqing was a 4-star alchemist as well as in 7th refinement. This had to be credited to the effort that Ling Han had made in his first refinement, as he had strengthened his foundations to an incredibly sturdy extent, and also because he possessed his own method of spirit refinement that had leapt out of alchemist Ziqing's circle. From the very beginning, alchemist Ziqing would only explain the basic principles of spirit refinement to Ling Han, and not the detailed method. He had had the latter ponder it himself. Though this had caused Ling Han to spend a very long time on the first refinement, it was completely worth it. Ling Han broke into a smile, slightly proud of himself. However, the second refinement is already so difficult, so the 9th refinement would be unimaginably hard. Though he had reached second refinement so quickly, the further you went, the harder spirit refinement would be. Hence, 3rd refinement and 4th refinement was the limit for most alchemists. Only those who had attained 5th refinement would be called grandmasters. Ling Han went into seclusion again to fully stabilize his capacity at second refinement. And at the same time, the agreed time of 3 years that alchemist Ziqing had spoken of was also getting nearer and nearer. All the holy sons and holy daughters were all rolling up their sleeves, eagerly waiting for this day to come. Initially, Lu Xianming had the highest chance because his natural talent in alchemy was indeed slightly superior to the rest's. However, he had the same weakness as Ling Han, and that was that his time for growth was not long enough. If he was given another 1 or 200 million years of time, then Lu Xianming would be able to gain enough of an advantage, but in a mere 3 years, he could not draw a clear distance between himself and the other holy sons and holy daughters. Thus, it was not just Lu Xianming that was holding his breath this time. It was the same for the others. Who would emerge as the final victor was still uncertain. On this day, Ling Han was still concocting alchemical pills, but he was interrupted. As it turned out, the time had arrived. The 10 holy sons and holy daughters had all been summoned to the alchemist's pavilion to undergo the final selection for the heir. Perhaps there would be no more holy sons and holy daughters in Alchemy City after today, only the future chairperson. Ling Han exited alone. Though he was living in the alchemist's pavilion, the alchemist's pavilion itself was very, very colossal. He had still walked a very far distance before he finally arrived at Qingyang Pavilion. This was where Alchemy City would discuss major events. The 10 holy sons and holy daughters were all standing in the hall, waiting for what could possibly be the most important turn of fate of their lives. At this time, even the most subtle among them looked excited. This step could possibly head to heaven, but also could possibly lead to hell. Ex-holy sons and ex-holy daughters were not important. Yet Ling Han was extremely calm. Firstly, he had enough confidence, and secondly, even if he could not become the chairperson of Alchemy City, he would not be too concerned either, because what he needed was just strength in both alchemy and cultivation. If he could become the chairperson of Alchemy City, the benefit was that it would be able to provide him with more cultivation resources, but it was just that. Alchemist Ziqing saw this, and involuntarily smiled. This disciple of his really had the bearing of a general. Just look, others were almost killed by their anxiety, and only he was as steady as a mountain. With this comparison, Ling Han immediately stood out. In the hall, alchemists were gathered, but Alchemist Chu Yi and Alchemist Heavenly Heart, the two 4-star alchemists, were absent. With their personalities, they would not be concerned about who would become the chairperson of Alchemy City. It was fine as long as he did not squander the wealth of his ancestors to nothing. And precisely because of this, they had supported Alchemist Zi Cheng's move to banish Lu Jing. Who asked you to collude with outsiders? Competition was fine, but betrayal was definitely not permitted. There were many 3-star alchemists, and they sat down in rows all around the hall. As for 2-star alchemists and 1-star alchemists, they did not qualify to sit down, and could only stand. Their numbers were naturally even higher. As far as the eye could see, there were people all around. Alchemist Zi Qing calmly announced, "Today is the day to select the future chairperson of Alchemy City, and among the 10 of you, one person will bear the heavy responsibility of leading our city in future. However, others cannot slack off either. You all are also the pillars of support for our city, and the city will ultimately have to depend on you in the future." "Yes, Lord Chairperson." The 10 holy sons and holy daughters all obeyed solemnly. "The rules are very simple. You have to concoct a 2-star alchemical pill, at least with 2nd refinement. A 3-star alchemical pill or a spirit refinement higher than 2nd refinement will get additional marks. The concoction of the alchemical pill and quality of spirit refinement will also affect the final mark. Additionally, if the cultivation time in alchemy is extremely short, there will also be additional marks awarded." These final words were clearly prepared for Ling Han. Though Lu Xianming, too, had not immersed himself for a very long time in alchemy, and could also get additional marks, he definitely was far from being compared to Ling Han. Alchemist Zi Qing glanced at the 10 people, and then waved his hand. "Begin." He already knew Ling Han's abilities in alchemy, and thus was not bothered to set a few stages to make his decision. He might as well directly select his heir. Ling Han and the others entered into an alchemy chamber respectively. They were not restricted to concocting a specific alchemical pill, and were also allowed to fail, but the total time given was only slightly more than 3 months added with time acceleration. It was only 1 day's time in real time. The results would be clear a day later. Ling Han was not concerned with how the others would do. He was just like how he usually was, beginning his concoction step by step. In another alchemy chamber, Lu Xianming was filled with confidence. In a mere 3 years' time, even if the time cultivation chamber was taken into account, it was only 300 years. He did not believe that others could gain any massive improvement in this time, but he was different. In terms of strength in alchemy, he was not much inferior to the other holy sons and holy daughters in the first place, but if his cultivation time was taken into account as well, the additional credit would be enough to compensate for his shortcoming in alchemy. Most importantly, he had also obtained a piece of scarce earth essence. If it was used during spirit refinement, it could greatly increase the quality of spirit refinement. Similarly, conducting 2nd refinement, if the final alchemical pill had the same number of stars, and the spirit refinement grade was also the same, then his advantage of being young would be reflected. The choice was based on potential in alchemists, and not absolute strength. Otherwise, what 3-star alchemist here was not stronger than them? Another who was also filled with confidence like Lu Xianming was Qin Guyu. Though she did not have scarce earth essence, she was a dividing soul tier, and the rarest trait of hers was that when she advanced into Yang soul tier, the divided soul that she had gotten possessed attributes of both water and wood. This was extremely rare. If she was purely only a cultivator, then getting this divided soul meant that she was a weakling in battle, but for an alchemist, this was a precious treasure. This was her trump card. It had never been known by others, and that even included her master. Possessing this kind of divided soul, she had an affinity with the essence of plants, and for alchemy, this kind of effect was incredibly amazing. Thus, she had the confidence that she could concoct a supreme celestial pill. The effect of spirit refinement was also to increase the grade of the alchemical pill. If she could concoct the alchemical pill to a supreme grade right at the very first step, then even if the effects of her spirit refinement were slightly weaker, she would still be able to emerge as champion. Chapter 1904 Giving Up? Chapter 1904 Giving Up? There was another person filled with confidence, and that was Kansas. He did not have any essence, or any plant-line divided soul, but his skill in alchemy was indeed the most outstanding of all the holy sons and holy daughters. Though they were similarly two-star alchemists, and similarly could only reach second refinement, the grade of his completed pill could reach high grade, surpassing the starting point of medium grade and low grade of the others, and in terms of spirit refinement, his standard of first refinement had gained the praise of all alchemists. Every round of spirit refinement was extremely important. It did not mean that second refinement was more important just because it was harder than first refinement. That was not the case. Every instance of spirit refinement was increasing the grade of the celestial pill. Every time was of utmost importance. It was just that after the first spirit refinement, it was as if the alchemical pill had also gained immunity, which led to the increase in difficulty of spirit refinement. With just his first refinement, he was worthy enough to look down on 99% of all alchemists. Otherwise, how could he be able to become a holy son? And now these 10 people here each had to have their respective strengths. After all, holy daughters and holy sons represented the prestige of a force. In the alchemy chamber, the 10 of them first concocted celestial pills. Some were delighted, while some were distressed because they did not bear up to the pressure, and the grade of the alchemical pill that they had concocted was too poor. Originally, they could have reached medium grade, and now it had actually fallen down to low grade. Among them, Kan was naturally the proudest of himself. The alchemical pill in his hands had reached high grade, which corresponded to his abilities. He had not performed below standard due to pressure. "The position of future chairperson is definitely in the bag," he said at a volume that only he could hear. "Ling Han, Lu Xianming, just you two wait. When I am promoted, that will be the day the two of you die." Compared to concocting alchemical pills, the time taken for spirit refinement would be much shorter. If one did not fail, half a day's time was enough, and second refinement would only need the short time of just a day. Thus, for those whose alchemical pill had not reached their expected grade, they began their second refinement. The time of slightly over 3 months was enough for everyone to concoct their pills 3 times. Additionally, spirit refinement only needed to fail, and it would mean the alchemical pill was worthless. Thus, even for those who had concocted alchemical pills that were ideal, they would have to concoct a few more in response to the possibility of failure of spirit refinement. However, they were not in a rush. They completely could concoct pills, spirit refine, and decide whether to continue concocting the next cauldron of alchemical pills based on the circumstances. A month later, Kan was the first to end his test. He pushed open the doors of the alchemy chamber and walked out, his face wearing an incredibly confident smile. For the pill that he had concocted, the basic grade was high grade, and had undergone 2 times of spirit refinement. Its first refinement was perfect, and second refinement was ordinary. Altogether, this result was a great breakthrough. Hence, that was why he was so filled with confidence. After merely a while, Lu Xianming also pushed open the doors and walked out similarly filled with confidence, his hand bearing an alchemical pill. The starting point of the alchemical pill he had concocted was medium grade, but because it had merged with the scarce earth essence, it had reached perfection after 2 rounds of spirit refinement. This was more or less the same result as Kan's, but his advantage was that he was younger. If their results were the same, it would naturally be him winning. Another while later, Qin Giyu also came out. Her expression was filled with weariness, but her eyes were extremely bright. She was holding a celestial pill in her hand, and she had sealed the aura of the alchemical pill with her own cultivation so that it did not seep out, and did not show the alchemical pill to others. She wanted to astound everyone instantly. None of them were anxious, and all were filled with self-confidence as they turned to look towards the remaining 7 alchemy chambers. These were alchemy chambers that were deliberately used for observation and competition. Thus, the walls on all four sides were transparent to viewers on the outside, yet those inside could not see what was outside. In this way, those outside could observe, while at the same time those that were inside could focus without distraction. What is he doing? Someone suddenly pointed to the alchemy chamber that Ling Han was in, his expression incredibly astonished. That was because after Ling Han had concocted an alchemical pill, he actually looked it over, gave a few sniffs, and then directly squeezed it to nothing. This definitely could not be a failed pill. Firstly, if the pill concoction had failed, there could not possibly have been an alchemical pill left behind, and secondly, from the color and luster of this alchemical pill, it had to have reached the extent of medium grade at least, and Ling Han actually destroyed it. What did that mean? Everyone heard him, and turned to look in that direction. They were all extremely stunned, and did not understand what Ling Han was playing at. Were you giving up? Humph! Lu Xianming, Qin Guyu, and O Kan all looked cold. This brat was indeed incapable. It had only been a mere 3 years, so what heights could he actually manage to reach? The pill concocted had to be a 1-star alchemical pill, and that was why he had directly destroyed it to avoid being embarrassed. Then why had he still come then? What a joke! Such a huge ruckus had been caused previously, so if he cowered now, how would he be able to face others in future? Thus, he pretended to concoct an alchemical pill. In any case, he was in a separate room, so everyone could only see if he had successfully concocted an alchemical pill or not, but had no idea exactly what kind of alchemical pill he had concocted. Thus, he could completely use something inferior to pull a bluff over their eyes. There was absolutely no need to treat him as a worthy rival. Aside from Ling Han, the other 6 people did not immediately come out, either. Instead, after they had completed their pill, they began concocting the second alchemical pill, hoping to concoct a better alchemical pill, and improve their spirit refinement so that their results could be improved. Another month later, another 3 holy sons pushed open the doors and exited, and now there were only 4 people left that were still continuing to concoct alchemical pills. Unexpectedly, Ling Han concocted his second cauldron of celestial pill, and then destroyed it himself again. As expected, what this guy had concocted had to be a 1-star alchemical pill, and that was why he did not dare to show the alchemical pill he had concocted to others at all. Not only Lu Xianming and the others had this kind of thought, even the many alchemists gathered here thought the same. Only alchemist Ziqing showed a hint of admiration. He naturally knew of Ling Han's strength in making alchemical pills. The alchemical pill that he had concocted the first 2 times definitely had to reach 2 stars, and the latest grade was definitely better than the last, so why had he destroyed it then? This was Ling Han giving himself pressure, forcing himself to make a breakthrough in a very short amount of time. For the third cauldron, he not only had to succeed, but the grade of the completed pill had to further improve as well. Harsh, he was really harsh on himself. Alchemist Ziqing really admired this disciple of his too much. Even if others were going to concoct 3 cauldrons, the completed pill of the last 2 cauldrons would definitely not be discarded either. Instead, they would choose the best out of the 3 cauldrons. As for Ling Han, he had forced himself into dire straits, but at the same time, this was also proof of Ling Han's strong self-confidence. He would definitely produce better results from this third cauldron. Only one that had this kind of self-confidence and determination was worthy of being his disciple and ascending to the pinnacle of alchemy. Alchemist Ziqing stroked his beard and smiled slightly. Even if Ling Han had really failed, he would think of some way to resolve this issue. So what? I am that shameless. If you can, come and bite me. Lu Xianming and the others were even more contemptuous. It had been a mere 3 years, and there was indeed no need to take Ling Han seriously as a rival. They had really thought too highly of this person. Ling Han thought of nothing else, and focused completely on alchemy. At present, his spirit was in a kind of incredibly subtle condition, close to being ethereal. This filled him with confidence. Every cauldron of alchemical pill he concocted would be better than the last. When he concocted his third cauldron, he had the urge to destroy it and concoct another cauldron again, but he suddenly recalled with a shiver that this was a test, and he could not afford to be rash anymore. He quickly stopped, and began spirit refinement. There were a total of 3 completed pills in this cauldron. After Ling Han's first refinement, he shook his head, and directly tossed the alchemical pill. Then, he drew out the second one and continued spirit refinement, but in the end, he had still thrown it away. There was only the last one left. Chapter 1905 Exit. Chapter 1905 Exit. Ling Han was the type that would be more motivated the more pressure he was under. Only the last alchemical pill was left. He instead broke out into a smile, a completely calm expression appearing on his face. As his hands moved, he began. Outside, aside from Ling Han, the other 9 people had all completed their pill concoction and spirit refinement, and there was only a slight bit of time left before the deadline of 1 day. However, in the alchemy chamber, because of the effects of time acceleration, it was enough to allow Ling Han to complete 2 times of spirit refinement. Everyone's eyes were drawn over. Just playing up the show. Lu Xianming's expression was filled with disdain. Ling Han's first 2 times of spirit refinement were only limited to first refinement, and then he had thrown the alchemical pill away. What did this mean? It had to be that he could only accomplish first refinement, and that was why he had deliberately thrown them away to conceal the fact that his abilities were inadequate. Right. This guy had merely used 4 to 5 years' time to accomplish first refinement, and this was extremely amazing, but the problem here was that the starting point of the test was 2-star alchemical pill and second refinement. Then, no matter how perfect your first refinement was, or how little time you had spent on alchemy, so what? This was also the reason why Lu Jin wanted to make an agreement of 3 years with alchemist Ziqing. That was because no matter how freakishly prodigious Ling Han was, he could not possibly attain second refinement in such a short amount of time. Even alchemist Ziqing was slightly nervous. Ling Han really did not have the slightest way out now. He would have to succeed or die trying. The more he cared, the more worried he was. If it was he himself that was concocting an alchemical pill, he would instead be more confident, but now he was so nervous that there was sweat on the palms of his hands. This little disciple was really capable of making things exciting. First refinement complete. A smile spread across Ling Han's face. In the recent half a year, he had been increasing his skill at first refinement gradually to a perfect level. Furthermore, it was established on his own method. This was astonishing as it meant that it was possible that he could create a system of spirit refinement that was solely his. At first, there were still some minor flaws, but after the last few imperfect spirit refinements, and under massive pressure, he had successfully completed the promotion. First refinement, perfect. Let's begin second refinement. Ling Han flicked his hand, and the celestial pill immediately danced. Multiple flashes of fire flew out from his palm, turning into many strings that interwove together behind the celestial pill like a spider's web. Ling Han was extremely focused. He had forgotten that this was a test, and was only purely refining this alchemical pill. Ethereal, natural, and close to great Tao. After they saw this scene, a great many alchemists were moved with shock. This kind of state was extremely hard to come by, and could enable the alchemical pill produced to reach a higher level than usual, as if the heaven and earth itself was providing aid. In that case, great Tao would naturally be extracted easily, interweaving and resonating with the medicinal effects. Gods, in such a heavily pressured atmosphere like a test, this brat was actually still capable of entering into an ethereal state. Fuck. They really didn't know whether to say this brat had zero interest in fame and profit, or was born just for alchemy. This was really fuck star. The expressions of Lu Xianming and the others changed drastically. Ling Han could actually accomplish second refinement. This was the second refinement. That was no joke. How could that be? Merely 3 years had passed, and it might be that he had not attained even first refinement, so how could he do second refinement? But facts spoke louder than words. They were rendered completely speechless. They only hoped that the grade of the alchemical pill that Ling Han had concocted was not too high, and the standard of his second refinement was not much, either. I think, just based on the fact that Holy Sun Ling could enter into an ethereal state under such conditions, he is worthy of becoming the chairperson of Alchemy City. Someone suddenly spoke up. That's right. This is really too rare. A considerable number of others expressed their agreement. That is inappropriate. Naturally, there would be others raising an objection. A test is a test. What could be accomplished without rules? That's right. Don't tell me that he would not be able to shine in Alchemy City without becoming chairperson? This opinion also gained the support of quite a number of people. The people on both sides broke into an argument. Though neither side could convince the other for the moment, it still caused Lu Xianming and the others to pale in shock. There had never been a case like this. The test had not ended, and about half the number already had someone that they supported. It should be known that there was still alchemist Ziqing behind Ling Han, and he only had to say something at this point to support Ling Han, and then that definitely was enough to make the final decision. Fortunately, alchemist Ziqing was expressionless all this while, and did not say anything. He was filled with confidence in Ling Han, and was completely disdainful of using this kind of little tricks. Of course, if Ling Han really failed in his spirit refinement, he would not mind using his influence to change the views of some people. Don't tell him that the strength of the disciple that he had taught still had to be doubted. Inside the alchemy chamber, a day's time passed quietly. Ling Han stretched out his hand and grabbed. Boom, the 9 heavens flames surged, wrapping around the celestial pill. The flames were ferocious, as if they were about to turn the celestial pill into ash. Right at this moment, Ling Han suddenly moved again, and Xianyin source water was channeled. Fire and water were incompatible, and the might of the 9 heavens flame was immediately restrained. With ice and fire on either side, the interweaving of extreme cold and extreme heat could create an amazing change. This was Ling Han's understanding of alchemy and pharmacology. Boom, the ice and fire surged, and then peace was restored. Ling Han's brow wrinkled in a frown. He felt a kind of urge to destroy this alchemical pill. It was actually just a little bit away from being absolutely perfect. He had at first thought both times of spirit refinement could be perfect, which made him feel that it was a great pity, and he wanted nothing more than to begin concocting another cauldron. He failed? Lu Xianming and the others thought. No, 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 no. If he had failed, the alchemical pill would have been destroyed. This was spirit refinement. It had to be that the quality of spirit refinement was not good enough, and that was why he had such a sour expression. The other 9 holy sons and holy daughters slightly steadied their emotions. The failure this time had to be capable of dealing a heavy blow to Ling Han's popularity. Subsequently, Ling Han also pushed open the doors and exited. Alchemist Ziqing opened his mouth and said, "Since everyone is done, we will begin assessing the grade of the alchemical pills." He paused, and then called out a few names. Luoying, Zigong, Gong Tian, the 10 of you are in charge of the examination. Yes. 10 alchemists walked out, and they were all 3-star alchemists. After gradually assigning pills, they stood in front of a holy son or holy daughter each, and then began their examination together. The time for pill concoction was very long, but examination would only need a short while. What more when these 10 people were all 3-star alchemists? But there were serious implications involved in the selection of the future chairperson of Alchemy City, so they repeatedly examined a few times over before coming to a final conclusion. Report the results according to the order in which they came out, Grandmaster Ziqing said calmly. Holy Sun Oaken has concocted a Blue Peak Spirit Transformation pill. Among 2-star alchemical pills, the difficulty level is medium, and the grade of the completed pill is high grade. First refinement is perfect, and the second refinement is ordinary. A 3-star alchemist immediately reported. Grandmaster Ziqing nodded and said, Then we'll use this result as the basis, and determine it as 10 marks, to be subtracted or added for subsequent grading. Agreed. All the alchemists nodded. Since there was comparison to be done, there definitely had to be material for reference. Holy Sun Lu Xianming has concocted the Jade Bone Pill. Among 2-star alchemical pills, the difficulty level is below average. The grade of the completed pill is medium grade. First refinement is perfect, and second refinement is also perfect, the second alchemist announced. Grandmaster Ziqing paused slightly and said, The difficulty level and the grade of the completed pill are both a bit low, but the 2 times of spirit refinement are both perfect. Furthermore, Lu Xianming has stepped into the path of alchemy for but 200 million years, which is extra credit, and the final mark is 11 marks. Any objections? Kan's expression paled abruptly. He had not thought he would have lost so quickly. Agreed. All the alchemists nodded. Alchemist Ziqing did not deliberately suppress Lu Xianming just because he was Lu Jin's disciple. He really was a person of noble character and unquestionable integrity. Yet Ling Han snickered internally. What noble character and unquestionable integrity did this master of his have? He was just certain that Ling Han would win, and had thus deliberately done this. Since he could win himself some popularity, why not? Wily fox, oh no, very astute and deep foresight. Chapter 1906 Ling Han ascends to the apex. Chapter 1906 Ling Han ascends to the apex. Holy Daughter Qingyu has concocted Earth Replenishment Pill. Among 2-star alchemical pills, the difficulty level is high. The grade of the completed pill is peak grade, and first refinement is ordinary, second refinement is ordinary, the third alchemist reported. As his words fell, a commotion rose up among the crowds. For a 2-star alchemist to concoct an alchemical pill of high difficulty, and still actually manage to reach the extent of peak grade, this was too exaggerated. Astonishing, too astonishing. Even Grandmaster Ziqing showed an expression of appreciation and said to Qingyu, You have advanced into dividing soul tier 300,000 years ago. Could it be that your first divided soul is an embodiment of one of the 5 elements of heaven and earth? As expected of a Grandmaster alchemist. He had immediately guessed the reason, but as for the exact elemental alignment, even he could not possibly make an accurate judgment. Yes. Qingyu immediately replied respectfully. My yang soul is the essence of water and wood. Essence of water and wood. Everyone showed expressions of envy. This kind of yang soul definitely did not have the slightest benefit for battle or cultivation, but for alchemists, it was like a precious gift bestowed by the gods. Only a fire and wood divided soul, or earth and wood divided soul could match that. This definitely could greatly add extra credit for her. Grandmaster Ziqing paused slightly, and then said, Comprehensive mark is 11. Qingyu was slightly disappointed, but now she shared first place with Lu Xianming, and had surpassed Kansas. Then, she really didn't have any other rivals. In the future, it would be a contest between only her and Lu Xianming. And she was a water and wood dividing soul tier. As her cultivation level increased, the benefits of that in alchemy would gradually be exhibited, and she would become even more brilliant and dazzling. Lu Xianming was definitely no match for her. Kan was even more disappointed. He knew that the position of chairperson was already incredibly far from him. All of a sudden, he was completely disheartened, and collapsed on the ground, not knowing what kind of expression he should wear. The 4th place, the 5th place, and the 6th place, the 10 alchemists all reported the grade of the alchemical pill they had respectively examined, while Grandmaster Ziqing gave a grade. He showed no bias to anyone, winning everyone's respect. Finally, it was Ling Han's turn. Holy Sun Ling Han has concocted Heavenly Flame Pill. Among 2-star alchemical pills, the difficulty level is high. The grade of the completed pill is high grade. The first refinement is perfect, second refinement is perfect, the 10th alchemist announced. What? Everyone erupted in uproar. Though the alchemical pill that Ling Han had concocted was slightly inferior to Qingyu's, it had also reached high grade, and added with his age in alchemy, that definitely could compensate for the gap between the two of them. In fact, he could even surpass her. And his 2 times of spirit refinement were actually both perfect. Hiss. That was not right. Weren't you just frowning? Didn't you mess up? Grandmaster Ziqing couldn't help but smile, and seeing doubtful expressions appear on quite a number of faces, he said, "The 10 of you can all come and examine." The other 9 three-star alchemists hurriedly gathered round. They could not believe that if they did not personally see it with their own eyes. But not a while later, all of them looked stunned, and felt a kind of reverence for a prodigy, even if Ling Han's present skill of alchemy was inferior to theirs. First refinement is perfect and flawless, but there is a slight flaw with the second refinement, though it can still be considered perfect. The 10 alchemists discussed for a while, and announced the final conclusion. They did not mention the grade of the completed pill, so they had to be certain about it. I don't believe it!" Lu Xianming called out in spite of himself. There was no need for Grandmaster Ziqing to give a grade. Everyone knew that Ling Han had already won, and furthermore, he had not surpassed the other holy sons and holy daughters by just a bit, either. "Humph, this is the conclusion of all 10 of us. How could you be allowed to doubt us?" a 3-star alchemist said without being the slightest bit polite. Just how many 4-star alchemists were there? Though Lu Xianming was a holy son, his future accomplishment should only be limited to being a 3-star alchemist, and added with the fact that he was only a 2-star alchemist at present, what right did he have to doubt the united conclusion of 10 3-star alchemists? "You're not convinced? Get lost, there is no need for you to be convinced." Grandmaster Ziqing nodded and said, "I give Ling Han 15 marks. Does anyone object?" Everyone exchanged looks. They all thought that it was absolute that Ling Han had surpassed Lu Xianming and Qin Guyu, but it was not to the high extent of 15 marks. 12 to 13 marks should be just about it. But it did not affect the result in any case, so what need was there to dampen Grandmaster Ziqing's spirits? It was his disciple, after all, so it was understandable that he wanted to lift him up to a higher position. Unfortunately, they did not truly understand. Grandmaster Ziqing had given Ling Han 15 marks not because he wanted to deliberately raise Ling Han higher, but because he had taken the method of spirit refinement that Ling Han had invented into account. Just for that alone, it was definitely reasonable to add another 2 or 3 marks. No matter what, Ling Han had won with a completely undisputed advantage. "Let me announce that the future chairperson of Alchemy City will be Ling Han," Grandmaster Ziqing said, his voice rolling out like thunder, ringing out through every corner of all 5 levels of Alchemy City. 300 million years later, I will leave my office, and Ling Han will inherit. Yes. In the hall, everyone bowed low. The replacement of the older generation with the new generation had been successfully completed, and Ling Han's potential also made everyone believe that this boy would definitely be able to become a 4-star alchemist in the future, and might in fact even surpass Grandmaster Ziqing. Even if he could not become a 5-star alchemist, perhaps he could reach 8th refinement in spirit refinement. Everyone left in turns, and both Qin Guyu and Lu Xianming stared at Ling Han venomously. If it were not for Ling Han's sudden rise to power, they would have had a chance to become the chairperson of Alchemy City. But this step could either be to heaven or to hell. Congratulations, Holy Son Ling. The other holy sons and holy daughters all came over to express their congratulations. They knew that they would be living in Ling Han's shadow in the future. Unless they were willing to leave Alchemy City, they would definitely have to bow their heads in front of Ling Han. Ling Han nodded at everyone with a slight smile. In the first place, he was a very magnanimous person. Holy Son Ling. Oken also walked over. Though his face was still indescribably pale, he still congratulated Ling Han. When it came down to it, this result was something that he could better accept because he had already been struck heavily in the very beginning, but in a surprising turn of events, either Lu Xianming nor Qin Guyu managed to be promoted to the position, which made him feel considerably better. Ling Han looked at him smilingly. In the beginning, Oken was very arrogant. He had wanted to recruit him, and when he had not succeeded, he had threatened him, and had even come up with malicious ideas against him. All the events of yesterday should be buried yesterday. From today onwards, I am willing to follow Holy Son Ling, and exert effort for the growth of Alchemy City. Oken knelt on a single knee as he announced his loyalty to Ling Han. Was a true surrender, Or a deliberate move to get nearer to him for the sake of a conspiracy? A confident smile spread across Ling Han's face. He had the generous spirit that could accommodate everyone in this world. However, if anyone wanted to stay by his side and still bear disloyalty, then don't blame him for being cruel and merciless, as he erased all of them. Good, then let's work together. Ling Han helped Oken up, and Oken smiled. It seemed as if the grudges between them had all died out with this smile, but whether Oken had truly been sincere, it was up to time to decide. One might know a person for a very long time, but still not understand his true character after all. Subsequently, there would naturally be a celebration hosted in the city. They did not invite outsiders this time round. It would have to wait for another 300 million years later when alchemist Ziqing left his office, and Ling Han succeeded his position. Then they would definitely invite the whole world. That was something for the future. 5 days later, the craze dissipated, and Ling Han began preparations to set out for his meeting with Xianlu. Chapter 1907 The Place of Achieving Tao of Celestial King Tier. Chapter 1907 The Place of Achieving Tao of Celestial King Tier. Ling Han was a very restless person. He had a very strong interest in alchemy, but was also very interested in cultivation. For the time being, the problem was that he had encountered a great dilemma in cultivation. Fifth severance was definitely not something attained through thinking hard. Xianlu had invited all the prodigies of the world so they could study cultivation together. There was definitely no shortage of top-tier prodigies among them. If he could spar with these people, Ling Han was sure that it should be of great help to his breaking through to the fifth severance. Furthermore, Xianlu was definitely a fifth severance. If he could spar with him head-on, it would definitely help him to analyze the profound mysteries of fifth severance. Thus, he was definitely going to keep this appointment. At present, alchemy was only his interest, and cultivation was what truly determined his fate. He had not forgotten small towers and the large black dog's worries about the future. In the future, there would be frighteningly powerful enemies. To say nothing of standing against them, just to know who this powerful enemy was, he still had to reach Celestial King Tier first. When a holy son, and furthermore, one that was to be the future chairperson, set out, it naturally was not something casual. Grandmaster Ziqing had initially wanted to send out a warship for Ling Han, but was met with refusal from Ling Han. The warship was too huge a target. Even if it was of 4-star level, and could suppress all immortal palace tiers, the result was extremely hard to determine against ascending origin tier. Furthermore, there were Celestial King tiers among the people that Ling Han had offended. What if the Thundercloud Celestial King or Purple River Celestial King made a move on Ling Han on a sudden whim? It was best to keep a lower profile. Furthermore, without any attendants or any warship, Ling Han could enter into the Black Tower whenever he liked. He did not need to hide from anyone. "Lord Holy Sun, can you take me with you so I can gain some experience?" Bewitching Maiden Ro approached, her face bearing a fawning smile. Ling Han was becoming better and better as time passed. Furthermore, he was a sure bet to become the future chairperson of Alchemy City. This position was too important, and he could just about decide the flow of alchemical pills in the entire Eastern Celestial Realm. Hence, she definitely had to cling on tight to Ling Han. Whether the Purity sect would be able to keep the structure of a 3-star force in the future, and reach 4 stars was all dependent on her now. Ling Han put on a fake smile. This bewitching maiden's smile was too false. He could tell with a single glance that she was just doing it for show. "Please, aren't you begging me now? Fine then. As long as you attend my husband's bed tonight, we'll bring you along." The Empress interrupted. "Sister, you are teasing me again." By now, bewitching Maiden Ro had also gained some strength to resist in front of the Empress. "In front of Sister's exquisite beauty, I feel inferior. How could I dare to claim a connection with Lord Holy Sun?" "Heh." The Empress smirked coldly, gripped bewitching Maiden Ro's chin, and said, "You either obediently become a member of the Ling clan, or stop thinking of any other ideas." "Sister!" Bewitching Maiden Ro put on a display of being pitiful. The Empress was unmoved. It was useless to be pretentious in front of her. Aside from Ling Han, she cared nothing for anyone in this world. Wasn't it a joke to want to gain her sympathy? Bewitching Maiden Row, having courted a rebuff, could only develop sisterly relations with the heavenly phoenix divine maiden, and it was unknown what tricks she had played, but she actually really had the heavenly phoenix divine maiden treat her like a sister, and she also managed to shamelessly follow the three of them. You see, I only wished to stay together with my dear sister. Ling Han and his group left very quietly. Perhaps Lu Xianming and Qin Gu were not willing to resign themselves to reality. They only had to send out some information that Ling Han had left Alchemy City, and there would definitely be a great many people that wished to take Ling Han's life. For example, Bai Yao. He could tell that Ling Han had hidden some kind of treasure, and definitely would not be willing to give up easily. Inside Alchemy City, there was still Grand Master Ziqing suppressing him, but if Ling Han was left alone, who else would be able to intimidate him? And there was also the old demon Blood Shadow. He had initially planned to wait 10 million years, but who would have imagined that Ling Han would only need a mere 5 years' time to become the future chairperson of Alchemy City? He definitely would come to seek Ling Han out, and demand the natural peach seal. It could not be helped. Who asked that Ling Han's present strength to be too low? Grand Master Ziqing had advised Ling Han before to obediently stay in Alchemy City, as he was sure that no one would dare make a move on him here. But how could Ling Han possibly obey? The reason he had stepped on the path of cultivation was so he could grasp his own fate. How could he be willing to hide in a single place and be protected by others? The four of them left Alchemy City quietly, heading all the way to Broken Clouds Mountain. Their destination was 180,000 miles away from Alchemy City. It was of course impossible that Ling Han and his group would be walking there on foot. Very quickly, they'd boarded a massive ship to travel on it. Broken Clouds Mountain was in the territory of the Eternal Prosperity Sect, and not only was the Eternal Prosperity Sect a Celestial King tier-level great sect, the Eternal Prosperity Celestial King himself was a frightening existence of 8th Heaven Celestial King tier. The territory under the reign of the Eternal Prosperity Sect was astonishingly colossal. To say nothing of this trip needing a very long period of time, even if they had entered into the Eternal Prosperity Sect, the trip to Broken Clouds Mountain would also need a considerably large amount of time. The celestial realm was too huge, and celestial beings had unlimited lifespan, so there would not be anyone grumbling about wasting so much time on traveling. 4 months later, Ling Han and his group finally entered into the territory of the Eternal Prosperity Sect. They did not immediately disembark from the ship, but rather traveled another 12+ days, and then disembarked. At this time, there was only about a 7 days trip by foot to Broken Clouds Mountain. This time naturally pertained to severing mundane tiers. Dividing soul tier elites naturally did not need such a long time. The Eternal Prosperity Sect, prosperous for all ages. The Eternal Prosperity Celestial King was a supreme elite that had already existed since at least an epoch ago. Wherever his name had spread, it was completely peaceful. In this vast area, there was not a single criminal or mountain bandit. A single thought from a Celestial King, and he could send out doppelgangers of his divine sense in various places all around the world. Below Celestial King tier, there was no one that could match him. Hence, this area was naturally completely clean and crime-free. Here, there were extraordinarily beautiful mountains and rivers that could be seen everywhere. Some peaks were floating in midair due to some mysterious force, and they were indescribably majestic. There was no difference of night and day in the celestial realm, but the Eternal Prosperity Celestial King had used a powerful technique to create a sun, differentiating day and night. Just like his great name, wherever the sun shone, his power could reach. A few days later, Ling Han and his group arrived at a massive range of mountains. And this was Broken Clouds Mountain. It had the word broken in its name, not because this was a low mountain range, or they had broken in half, but rather because they were too tall, so tall that they had broken the clouds in the skies, and that was why they were called Broken Clouds Mountains. There were about 100 such peaks, and the one that Ling Han and his group wanted to go to was 3 Young Peak. Three Yang Peak was not the highest mountain peak in the Broken Clouds Mountains, but was the most famous. That was because this was where the Eternal Prosperity Celestial King had taken the last step and become a Celestial King. It had an unmatched historical significance. When a Celestial King was born, he naturally left behind his immortal aura here. If one comprehended Tao here, he might not be enlightened and achieve Tao himself, but there still had to be some benefits. But the Eternal Prosperity sect did not establish this place as private property, forbidding outsiders from entering. On the other hand, everyone could come here, but the prerequisite was that they would have to be worthy of ascending the mountain. Where a Celestial King achieved Tao, it was inevitable that it would affect the channeling of heaven and earth. Three Yang Peak was naturally not a peak that everyone could climb. It was said that only true King Tiers could be worthy of getting approval from heaven and earth, and ascend this holy land of achieving Tao. Ling Han had found out this information in a city before entering into the mountains, and couldn't help but feel very interested. The place where a Celestial King had achieved Tao, what kind of amazing traits would it have? Chapter 1908 At the Foot of the Mountain. Chapter 1908 At the Foot of the Mountain. There was already not much time left until the agreed time with Xianlu. Ling Han hurried, and continued to increase his abilities in alchemy. In cultivation, he had already reached the 4th Severance Peak stage, and there was no further possibility that he could improve any further. Neither he nor the Empress had refined the heavenly Tao Jade, but they were instead waiting for an opportunity. For example, when they were fighting with first-rate prodigies, and could directly feel the aura of a 5th Severance, then if they were to refine the heavenly Tao Jade at that moment, they perhaps might be able to succeed in one go. Other mountain rocks could attack Jade, so Ling Han lingered on alchemy. Perhaps he could gain a breakthrough in alchemy, and while he was at it, open the doors to the next stage in his cultivation. Bewitching Maiden Row was very expectant. The circles that she mixed around in were initially only the holy daughters and holy sons of 3-star forces, and now not only had she advanced to the level of 5-star forces, she could get an invitation from Xianlu, even. There was definitely not any heir of any random Celestial King tier sect that was worthy of that. It definitely had to be top-notch Emperor tiers, stronger than even Zhao Qifeng. Otherwise, they would only be worthy of becoming his subordinates. How could they be worthy of becoming his esteemed guests? Xianlu, exactly what kind of prodigy is he? Both Ling Han and the Empress were very curious. Ever since they entered into the Eternal Prosperity sect, there was talk everywhere about the legend of Xianlu, and it was like he was a second Eternal Prosperity Celestial King. No one doubted that Xianlu could become a Celestial King, and everyone was rather wondering exactly what heights he would be able to attain in future. 5th heaven? 7th heaven? 8th heaven? Or even 9th heaven? At the foot of Three Yang Peak, people gradually came, but not a single person climbed the mountain. Because there was not a single person that could ascend. Ling Han had tried previously. He, too, could not ascend. There was a supreme pressure, and even the 9 heavens flame and Xianin source water could not resist it. That was because this was not purely pressure, but also contained the martial intent of a supreme elite. To say the least, even if it was just pure pressure, it had originated from an 8th heaven Celestial King, and even the source power of heaven and earth was only Celestial King tier level, but there were still 9 heavens in Celestial King tier. Perhaps it could only be comparable to the 1st heaven, or possibly 9th heaven. The possibility that it could resist an 8th heaven Celestial King was extremely low. How was he going to go up then? Even these 2 source powers of heaven and earth were completely helpless. Then, even if Xianlu was at 5th Severance, Ling Han did not believe that the former could set foot. Perhaps this place could not be entered at any time, but rather one had to wait for the time that it opened like some kind of mystery realm. The day the Eternal Prosperity Celestial King achieved Tao. It should be this one day, and that was why Xianlu had said when the 3 stars aligned. There were more and more people coming, and they all waited at the side. Some indeed attempted to ascend the mountain, but they were very soon defeated with flushed faces and ears. In the face of Celestial King tier level pressure, no matter what kind of supreme prodigy you were, you could only feel powerless and incompetent. The Empress and Bewitching Maiden Ro drew looks. There was no need to mention Bewitching Maiden Ro. She was born delicate and extremely lovely. Though she was not *****, her index of attraction was still off the charts. The Empress still kept a very low profile, and wore a piece of white muslin on her pretty face, covering her exquisite beauty. However, her perfect figure and incomparable bearing could not be concealed in any form or manner. Her attraction was definitely not inferior to Bewitching Maiden Ro's. Since they had the free time now, a great many people began to admire these two women. Some were more reserved, while some were incredibly direct. They were just looking boldly, completely unrestrained in their attention. Looking was a right that belonged to everyone, but just staring straight on like that, was that appropriate? Ling Han strode forwards and arrived in front of a man. "Hey, you're blocking me." This was a young man with a large, tall build. He had a head of dark blue hair, and there were two horns on his head that were similarly exuding a dark blue light. Ling Han frowned and said, "If you keep staring at someone like that, it is very impolite." "Ha ha!" The blue-haired youth hollered in laughter, then looked at Ling Han and said, "Ugly, have you heard the saying that only heroes are worthy of beauties?" "Oh, are you a hero?" Ling Han asked evenly. "That's right. I, Zhu Xuega, am the strongest prodigy in this world." The blue-haired youth stuck out a finger and tapped his chest. "Hee hee, how boastful of you!" Ling Han had not said anything when he heard someone else interrupt coldly. "Among those who were invited here, which of them was not a supreme prodigy?" It should be known that even Zhao Qingfeng was only Yan Xianlu's subordinate, and was not worthy of becoming his guest. For this kind of emperor tier, or in fact monarch tier, who would yield to another? "And who the hell are you?" Zhu Xuega turned around, shouting at that person, his tone very unfriendly. This young man who had interfered proudly declared, "Lu Feizhang! Never heard of you!" Zhu Xuega snorted. "Then now you know, and you will remember it for the rest of your life because I am the person that will bestow terrible defeat on you." Lu Feizhang moved aggressively, stretching out his left hand, which turned into a gigantic golden beast's claw, clawing out at Zhu Xuega. "Ha! You are asking for your own humiliation here." Zhu Xuega did not cower in the slightest. With him brandishing both arms, a dark blue ocean appeared, and there was the sound of massive waves crashing against the coast, greeting the incoming attack with earth-shattering power. Boom! The two young prodigies broke into a great battle. Both of them were outstanding characters in the Severing Mundane tier, and even if either of them had reached fifth severance, they had traveled a very far distance in the empty vacuum between Severing Mundane tier and Dividing Soul tier, so their battle prowess was incredibly astonishing. Ling Han was shocked. Why had someone stolen his business? He rubbed his chin. Could it be that he really had a halo of bad luck? Otherwise, why had everything been all well just now, but when he had just spoken a few words, there would be someone coming to blows fiercely? Though he was very restless, and very much wanted to make a move, he had been concocting alchemical pills over these 3 years, and did not have a chance to move at all. After all, he was disdainful of joining forces with another, and besides, he could not bring himself to make a move on Lu Feizhang, so he could only step back in great disappointment. "Yo, does Lord Holy Sun want to fly into a rage for the sake of his lover?" Bewitching Maiden Ro laughed lightly, covering her mouth with a hand. Her beautiful figure shook seductively, and was incredibly captivating. "Unfortunately, someone has snatched your business from you. Do you believe that I will spank you?" Ling Han threatened. "Could you bring yourself to?" Bewitching Maiden Ro looked at him plaintively, looking very pitiful. "Pretender!" Ling Han sneered and said, "Bewitching Maiden, don't lose your own measure in your joy. If I go all the way with you, and just leave without a word, whom would you be making your complaints to?" Bewitching Maiden Ro felt her heart jolt. Facing other men, she was confident that she could twist them around her little finger, and easily play around with them. But Ling Han was different from the rest. It was like his heart was practically forged from iron. If she really slept with him, How could the holy daughter of a mere 3-star force seek justice from the future chairperson of a 4-star force? Seeing bewitching Maiden Ro was intimidated, Ling Han's heart relaxed. Even he could not help but admit bewitching Maiden Ro was very captivating. But what could he do when the heavenly phoenix divine maiden allowed her to follow? Husband, you are not only capable of attracting trouble yourself, you can also affect others, the heavenly phoenix divine maiden said smilingly. At this time, Lu Feizhang and Zhu Xuega had both become truly angered as the battle progressed. Both great prodigies were using all their abilities, like two suns at noon. As the Empress watched, her expression was slightly solemn. After a while she said, "These two people are both very strong. If I didn't use any trump cards, I would at most be capable of just fighting them to a tie." Ling Han nodded. Both of them were not just a bit stronger than Zhao Qifeng. The Empress had not overestimated them, nor was she underplaying her own abilities, but merely stating facts. Furthermore, the Empress had her trump cards, but these two probably had theirs too, right? You should be able to assuredly defeat them, the Empress continued, her tone incredibly certain. Chapter 1909 Yan Xianlu appears. Chapter 1909 Yan Xianlu appears. Ling Han showed a smile. By now, he had reached the 4th Severance Peak stage, and was only an opportunity away from advancing into the 5th Severance. He had definitely cultivated the 4th Severance to a completely perfect, flawless extent. And added with the fact that he had too many trump cards, merely the two source powers of heaven and earth were enough to make any celestial king blush with shame. It would be really strange if he didn't win in a battle of equals. However, the Empress had not refined the heavenly Tao Jade. If she could accomplish the leap over the Dragon's Gate, she would be able to push open a completely new set of doors, increasing her battle prowess to the true supreme pinnacle. Such as Yan Xianlu? The 5th Severance? Was there any 5th Severance elite here? Ling Han's eyes swept over the masses, but though each and every prodigy's pride skyrocketed, with them possessing astonishing self-confidence, all of their auras were incredibly reserved. It was completely impossible to estimate their cultivation. I am Dong Menhong. I feel an itch in my fists just from watching. Who would be willing to fight me? A man with a tall build leaped out. He was incredibly bold, his hand already holding a purple machete that was as long as 3 meters as he issued a challenge to the masses. I will! A young man in yellow leaped out. He did not say much nonsense, and immediately charged into an intense battle with Dong Menhong. For prodigies like them, they were all maniacs of cultivation. Seeing that there were already 2 pairs that were engaged in fierce battle, and their skill was extremely high, not in the slightest bit inferior to their own, the others couldn't help but feel their fighting spirit ignite. More and more people entered the fray, launching an intense battle, which later turned into a battle royale. In the end, one's opponents could be distinguished any longer. They simply attacked anyone they saw. It was really complete chaos. Only a minority were not dragged into this chaotic battle, and stood farther away, watching with their arms crossed over their chests. Brother Lao, when Yan Xianlu comes later, he'd probably be infuriated to see this scene, right? A spectator commented in amusement. However, when his eyes passed over the great battle chaos, his eyes were filled with contempt. There was a youth in purple standing next to him. He was incredibly dashing and handsome, and his complexion was exaggeratedly fair. He was as smooth-skinned as a woman. Not just that, his features were also delicate and pretty, and his brows thin and long, appearing to be very feminine. If it were not for the fact that he had an Adam's apple, others would really think that he was actually a woman pretending to be a man, and a very unsuccessful disguise at that. The purple-robed youth smiled, revealing 2 rows of snow-white teeth as fine as shells. If you make a move, you will be able to suppress all of them in a single move. When he spoke, one could tell his voice was high-pitched and thin, as if he was a eunuch. Normally, even if he was really a eunuch, when one had cultivated to celestial tier, any missing limbs could be regrown, so there would not be anything like handicap or cripple. Haha, that is Yan Xianlu's business. What business is it of mine? The first person said. He was dressed all in white, completely spotless, appearing to be very unconstrained. The youth in purple smiled again. Then what are you saying now? I heard that you have a lot of interest in Xianlu, so aren't I just creating a chance for you so you could approach Xianlu? The young man in white said smilingly. Xiao! The youth in purple suddenly made a move. His right hand was as flexible as if it was boneless as it turned into a snake. Furthermore, it was a golden snake. The snake's mouth opened widely, revealing 2 fangs as it bit at that young man in white. A frightening aura rippled out. Boom! Under the shock wave, the battle royale came to an abrupt halt. Everyone looked over. It was too devastating. It was as if they had seen a source beast of heaven and earth that was suddenly showing its might towards them. Ha ha ha, Lao Song, I knew that women have poisonous hearts. The young man in white pressed down. Boom! A white screen of light appeared in front of him. Multiple patterns of great Tao bloomed on it, capable of suppressing the heavens and setting the universe. Boom! The golden snake bit down, but could do nothing against this white screen of light. Shan Jitong, are you courting death? Lao Song asked menacingly, his voice shockingly sharp and high-pitched. That would depend on whether you have that ability. The young man in white, Shan Jitong, laughed loudly, not the slightest bit afraid. The 2 great elites clashed. A boundless aura rippled out, turning into a gigantic serpent behind Lao Song. It was completely golden, and there were patterns of great Tao on it, but not a single one could be distinguished clearly. It was like chaos. The great serpent coiled its body. It was at least 30,000 meters tall, its aura devastating as if it was capable of shattering the heavens with a slight movement. An image also appeared behind Shan Jitong. That was a white sword, and looked as if it was forged from a sword. It seemed capable of shattering at the slightest touch, but was completely able to resist the might of that giant serpent. 5th Severance! Ling Han and the Empress exchanged a look, and spat out these 2 words at the same time. The 4th Severance definitely could not possibly be this strong. Only the 5th Severance could reach this kind of height. Merely a ripple of aura was enough to make severing mundane tears feel as if they had fallen into an abyss as their hearts and spirits trembled. True enough, the gathering of prodigies had other 5th Severance elites aside from Xianlu. That is, Source Snake of Heaven and Earth. Bewitching Maiden Rose said in a shaky voice, her pretty face bearing an expression of fear, feeling an indescribable terror. Source Snake? Ling Han had heard of source powers of heaven and earth, like the 9 heavens flame and Xianin source water, and also knew of the chaos source rock. It was said to be the first rock that had formed when heaven and earth were split apart. However, what the heck was a source snake? When the heaven and earth first split apart, there was initially nothing, but as heaven and earth improved, the first batch of living creatures appeared, and they are collectively called Ancestral Source. Small Tower suddenly spoke up. The first dragon in the world is called the Ancestor Dragon, Source Dragon, and the first phoenix in the world is called the Ancestor Phoenix, Source Phoenix. Then, the first snake that was born in the world would be called Source Snake. The ancestor of all snakes, Source Snake. What level is it? Ling Han asked. Ancestral source creatures are definitely at Celestial King tier. However, for different source types, the height that they could reach in the Celestial King tier would also be different. Small Tower said. The strongest is naturally the likes of Ancestor Dragon and Ancestor Phoenix. Ancestor Snake is also considerably strong. It could be 7th heaven, or 8th heaven. Without unique luck, there should be no hope that it could reach 9th heaven. Ling Han nodded. This Lao Song had to be an heir of the bloodline of Source Snake. However, it was unknown whether he was a snake that had taken human form, or he personally was human but had cultivated the techniques of the Source Snake. Thinking about it, the chance of the latter being true was not very high. He should be a descendant of the Source Snake to be able to reach this kind of height. Ling Han's blood for battle bubbled. There was not just a single 5th Severance here. Perhaps just watching these people battle would be enough to help him complete his breakthrough. He and the Empress both watched closely. This was the first time that had really seen 5th Severance elites. Merely feeling that kind of aura was enough to help them gain a sliver of a chance of breaking through. Brother Lao, Brother Shan. What's going on here? Even if my reception is not satisfactory, there is no need for the two of you to get into a fight, right? Amidst laughter, a young man in embroidered robes was approaching, stepping on air. He was moving at a very fast speed. There were 3 young people behind him, and they were 2 men and a woman, respectively. All had the bearing of giants among men. Xianlu. Both Lao Song and Shan Jitong withdrew from the clash, and turned to look at this young man in embroidered robes, revealing a strong wariness in their expressions. A 4th severance could never imagine how strong Xianlu was. Only freaks that were similarly a 5th severance like them knew just how strong this young man was. He was so strong that it would practically drive others to despair. A divine fetus that had been born on the celestial path. By birth, he had an affinity to Tao, and could learn any celestial technique at first attempt, and gain mastery upon learning. In fact, he could even surpass the person who had invented this technique in the first place. This really was possibly a unique child that had been born from heaven and earth, and was destined to be unmatched. Ling Han, too, couldn't help but feel his interest spike. He looked towards Xianlu. He had heard countless times of this person. In fact, his ears were probably going to get scabs from the many times he had heard about him, but he had never had the chance to see him before. Chapter 1910 Absolute Monarch Tier. Chapter 1910 Absolute Monarch Tier. Xianlu was handsome, but not as word-shakingly pretty as Lao Song, and was just ordinarily good-looking. However, when Xianlu appeared, whether it was Lao Song or Shan Jitong, their graceful bearing was suppressed as if they had become the background to set off his brilliance, dim and dull in his presence. They were all at the 5th severance, but there was actually such a huge gap. The king of the celestial path was definitely not just an empty boast. Xianlu's expression was calm, but the 3 followers behind him could feel a sliver of anger from their master. He had invited others to gather here, but the host had yet to arrive, and the guests had actually come to blows already. Could it be that they thought that just because he had not personally seen it with his own eyes, he was unaware that a battle royale had previously occurred here? If this spread out, it really would become a joke. Someone actually dared to create trouble at the feast that he, Xianlu, hosted? We were just playing around to pass some idle time, Shan Jitong said smilingly. His figure was as upright as a sword. It was naturally impossible that his bearing would weaken in front of Xianlu. 5th severance meant monarch tier, so how could a monarch tier possibly fear anyone? Meanwhile, Lao Song directed a gentle and reserved gaze at Xianlu. His eyes flickered green, and there was an indescribable emotion in them. Previously, Shan Jitong had mocked that he was interested in Xianlu. It looked like this was not just empty words. There really existed this kind of possibility. Xianlu only smiled faintly, but did not pursue the matter. He raised his head to look at the skies. That massive sun had gradually dimmed, and a bright moon was beginning to exude its luster, while the sky was covered with stars that shone brilliantly. There is still some time left until the 3 stars align, he said calmly. Since everyone is getting impatient from waiting, let's all just sit down then. He took the lead to sit down, and it was as if his movement had a powerful influence. A considerable number did not even realize it themselves as they sat down with him. Only then did their expressions shift drastically. Every move of this person could actually influence others, and affect even such top-notch emperor tiers like themselves. Only a limited number were exceptions, such as Shan Jitong, Lao Song, Ling Han, and the Empress. The heavenly phoenix divine maiden was standing with support from Ling Han, while bewitching maiden Ro was assisted by the Empress. This was a woman of the Ling clan, so how could she be affected by outsiders? In addition, there were 5 others that were standing. They were not monarch tiers, but rather possessed the potential to break through to become monarch tiers. Xianlu's eyes wandered over the group. When his eyes passed over Ling Han and his group, he paused slightly, but his eyes immediately wandered away. Even the Empress and bewitching maiden Ro could not garner a second glance from him. This person's willpower was frighteningly staunch. Ling Han smiled at the Empress. They drew out a stone chair from within their spatial god tool, and then sat down. They would sit, but it was definitely not because of a command from Xianlu. Xianlu revealed a smile filled with hidden meaning. His eyes swept over the masses, taking note of those few that were capable of standing upright. These were the true people he wanted to recruit. The rest were ordinary, and he couldn't even bother himself to recruit them as his subordinates. All of you have traveled far, thank you. He spoke up. I have invited everyone here firstly so we can discuss cultivation together. Hee. Shan Jitong immediately showed an expression of disdain. To discuss cultivation with these people? Xianlu, has your head been kicked by a donkey? Are these people even worthy? He was a monarch tier. What king tier or emperor tier was worthy of being his equal? What did you say? A considerable number stood up, their faces filled with indignant fury. Isn't that the case? You all are just a bunch of trash. Shan Jitong scoffed. Even if all of you joined forces, I would be able to suppress you with only a single finger. What right do you all have to discuss cultivation with me? Isn't that just a joke? You can give it a try. A youth in green leaped out, 3 silver horizontal lines on his forehead. Shan Jitong glanced at him, and disdainfully said, Silver clam race? I remember that a so-called prodigy emerged from your race, called Ha Ming or something, and I suppressed him within 3 moves. He could not even hold up to a single blow. The expression of the youth in green changed swiftly. Pointing at Shan Jitong, he exclaimed, You are the 7 Swords Demon King. And now, do you still wish to exchange blows with me? Shan Jitong asked calmly. The face of the green-robed youth flushed red, and then turned green. Yet he simply turned around and left. He had directly fled. The Ha Ming that Shan Jitong had spoken of was a senior that was a good few generations older than the green-robed youth. When he had been in the Severing Mundane tier, he, too, had been invincible once, and was acknowledged by the race as the person that had the highest chances of becoming a celestial king. However, Ha Ming had gone out on a training trip once, and was horribly defeated by a Severing Mundane tier. From then onwards, his Tao heart was completely lost, and he had become completely ordinary. The person that had defeated him was called the 7 Swords Demon King. That was because all his opponents would definitely lose within 7 strikes from his sword. The youth in green did not know that this 7 Swords Demon King was Shan Jitong, or he would definitely not dare to provoke the latter. When Ha Ming had been defeated, Shan Jitong had still been a 4th severance. The two of them had been equal in cultivation level, and there had been no suppression in terms of cultivation level. And the youth in green knew himself well. Whether it was in terms of natural talent in cultivation or strength, he was greatly inferior to Ha Ming. He had no wish to have the same ending as Ha Ming. Everyone was shocked. The youth in green was a prodigy that had recently risen from the Silver Clam race, and had a cultivation level of 4th Severance Peak stage. His battle prowess was astonishing, but he had actually been scared off into flight with a few words from Shan Jitong. This was really hard to imagine. The 7 Swords Demon King. After a moment of shock, realization finally dawned on them. As it turned out, Shan Jitong was that mysterious 7 Swords Demon King. In the past, there had once been a young elite swordsman issuing challenges everywhere, and who knew how many Severing Mundane tier prodigies had been defeated within 7 strikes from his sword. For some, even their Tao heart had crumbled. But 30,000 years ago, the 7 Swords Demon King suddenly disappeared without a trace. Now that they thought about it, Shan Jitong should have been at the 4th Severance Peak stage at the time, and had issued challenges everywhere for the sake of breaking through to the 5th Severance. Clearly, Shan Jitong had succeeded, and that was why he had disappeared 30,000 years ago. That was because there was no need for him to travel around and issue challenges anymore. Xianlu, exactly what have you invited us here for? Shan Jitong asked impatiently. Though Celestials had a limitless lifespan, he was not willing to waste his time on meaningless affairs. Xianlu smiled calmly, but said something that was completely off-topic. This 3 Young Peak is the place where my master achieved Tao. When he succeeded, 3 stars aligned, and the unusual scene was astonishing. This time, it is the anniversary of an epoch since my master achieved Tao. My master has predicted that a bizarre event would once again descend from the heavens, and the one who could ascend to the peak would gain great fortune from the heaven and earth. He looked at Shan Jitong and Lao Song. As expected, both of them looked tempted. He continued, "The reason that I have not broken through to the dividing soul tier was precisely because I have been waiting for this day. Since there is something as good as that, why did you summon us?" Lao Song asked. "Today is the day the 3 stars align. The celestial king tier level might here will decline to its weakest, but even so, it is not everyone that would be worthy of climbing the mountain," Yan Xianlu said calmly. "I have never minded contesting with others. Furthermore, I have another important matter." "What is it?" Shan Jitong asked. In the area, only he and Lao Song were worthy of speaking to Yan Xianlu like equals. "There is no rush yet," Yan Xianlu said calmly. "Without reaching the mountain summit, even if you knew, there would be no meaning to it." Chapter 1911 Climbing the Mountain. Chapter 1911 Climbing the Mountain. Without reaching the summit, they didn't even have the right to know. Ling Han was also interested. What exactly did this Yan Xianlu want to do? To set foot in the place where the eternal prosperity celestial king had achieved Tao was a once-in-an-epoch opportunity, yet he took it out to be shared with others without hesitation. Just how generous was he? Furthermore, even the right to participate could only be obtained once they reached the summit. Just what major event was that? Could it be that it had something to do with the storm of darkness? Ling Han was expressionless, yet said to the heavenly phoenix divine maiden, "Fonger, you go into the spatial god tool first." And the heavenly phoenix divine maiden nodded gently. To say nothing of the fact that she was not king tier level, she hadn't even advanced into the severing mundane tier, so she naturally did not have the right to climb the mountain. She didn't even have the right to make an attempt. Ling Han drew the heavenly phoenix divine maiden into the black tower. As for bewitching maiden Ro, he naturally couldn't be bothered to care. "Sigh, some people, really!" Bewitching maiden Rose sighed deliberately. Ling Han only acted as if he had not heard. It was fine as long as he ignored this bewitching woman. Otherwise, she would only become more and more stirred up. "The time for the 3 stars to align is here," Yan Xianlu suddenly declared, pointing a finger at the skies. 3 bright stars appeared, and were orbiting on a specific course. "We can now climb the mountain. The Tao of heaven and earth is already channeled. Whoever can reach the summit first, and sits on the great rock which my master had sat on to comprehend Tao in the past will be able to gain the greatest fortune. Therefore everyone, start moving." An aura that could not be named rippled out, and some mysterious change seemed to have taken place on the mountain peak, yet one could not really say what this change was. Yan Xianlu was the first to set out. He took a step, already beginning to ascend the mountain. Lao Song and Shan Jitong also moved at almost the same time. They were only a single step behind. The 3 of them advanced together, heading towards the summit. Yan Xianlu's 3 followers, meanwhile, remained where they stood, and did not follow. They looked towards Ling Han, all showing an icy expression. Zhao Qifeng had been killed by Ling Han. They naturally saw Ling Han as an enemy. If it were not for the fact that Yan Xianlu forbade them, they would definitely have made a move by now. Ling Han naturally would not take them to heart. They were only equal in strength to Zhao Qifeng. Even if he stepped on them, he would not feel anything. If they were defiant, he merely had to stomp them flat. Ling Han took the Empress's hand. The latter was restless. No matter what, she wanted to find out just how wide the gap was between herself and top-notch prodigies. Unafraid, others also showed fighting spirit. Who did not want to become the most supreme of king tiers, and look down on the rest of the world? This was a great opportunity. The place where a celestial king achieved Tao, the cycle of a whole epoch, this kind of fortune would be astonishingly great. Ling Han looked at the Empress and said, "Perhaps this is the chance for us to reach the 5th severance." The Empress nodded. Previously, Though they had not exchanged blows with Fifth Severance elites, they had felt the auras of this level. They could claim to have gained a solid understanding. If they gained a great fortune, and refined the heavenly Tao Jade, then perhaps they would be able to advance to the Fifth Severance already today. When the 3 stars aligned, as expected, the strange aura on this mountain peak dispersed considerably. No longer was it difficult just to set foot on the mountain. However, this was still extremely difficult. Though Xianlu and his group looked very carefree, that was because they were Fifth Severance elites. While they were in the Severing Mundane tier, their strength was completely on the level of the Dividing Soul tier. To say nothing of others, merely when Ling Han stepped forward, he could feel a frightening pressure assault him, making him as if his spine was about to bend. The Empress was still fine, only showing an expression of slight strain, but bewitching Maiden Ro exclaimed in shock, and almost collapsed on the ground. "Beauty, let me help you up!" 2 big hands stretched out. The man said he was going to help her up, but judging by the angle at which he was extending his hands, he clearly planned to pass right under bewitching Maiden Ro's arms, and directly grab her breasts, which was extremely perverted. And it just so happened that bewitching Maiden Ro had collapsed from feeling this aura, and had no way to dodge at all. She could only show an expression of humiliation and fury. That man was a slender, tall youth in purple. A sliver of an evil grin curled up the corners of his lips. He naturally was doing it on purpose, and his motive was to take advantage of her. Of course, he, too, had absolute confidence. With his identity, strength, and status, he only had to crook a finger, and this delicate beauty would definitely throw herself into his arms. Pa! His hands tightened, and he was just about to feel secret pleasure in his heart when a strange feeling suddenly rose up with him. This feel is not right. Firstly, it's too hard, and secondly, the shape's not right either. Fuck. His eyes widened, and he saw that what his hands were holding were not the plump breasts of a beauty, but rather 2 feet. There was even dirt staining the soles of the shoes, and they were quite dirty. I am not an easy person. Why are you holding my feet? Ling Han asked smilingly. The young man in purple hurriedly released his grip and stepped back, looking like he could not retreat fast enough, and bearing an expression of loathing. He glared angrily at Ling Han. Previously it had precisely been this guy that had interfered, grabbing bewitching Maiden Ro and tossing her to the sidelines, and placed himself in her position. Of course, it had been feet. Even the mere thought of this made him feel disgusted. Though Ling Han had no intention of taking that bewitching woman for himself, they had been travel companions, so he could not bring himself to just sit back and watch as the latter was being taken advantage of. Thus, he had resolutely made a move just now. He smiled calmly and said, "You have groped my feet, so how do you plan on compensating me for it?" The purple-robed young man's lips crooked up slightly, showing a menacing expression. What a guy, he actually dared to play around with him. Oh, I know now. You are the newly promoted Holy Son of Alchemy City, right? This young man said, having recognized Ling Han. Previously, Alchemy City had invited all the forces in the world to watch the ceremony, and the White Sun sect that this young man belonged to also received an invitation. However, White Sun sect was a 6th Heaven Celestial King tier level sect, so how could they possibly condescend to attend? This invitation from Alchemy City definitely had to be sent out. This was a respect that was demanded, but whether White Sun sect attended or not, that was up to them to decide. They were too high and noble, so if they were in the mood, they could give some face, but if they were not happy, they could choose not to come. However, Ling Han's appearance and image had spread to practically all the forces in the entire Eastern Celestial Realm. This was an advertisement. This is the Holy Son of our Alchemy City. If you encounter him in future, remember to give some face. Ling Han thought for a moment before coming to a realization. He said, "There is no use trying to worm your way into being my friend. Pay up for my compensation." The purple-robed young man couldn't help but feel his mouth twitch. He had touched Ling Han's stinky feet in a moment of carelessness, and now was feeling exceedingly disgusted. As the guilty party, you were actually making your complaints first? He menacingly said. The holy son of Alchemy City may be considered something in the eyes of others, but in my, Shang Da's, eyes, you are but a stinky worm. If you continue to do attention-seeking actions with your ugliness, take care that I will be cruel and merciless. He really had not exaggerated. Alchemy City could only just barely be considered a 5-star force, and only those like the Thundercloud Palace and Zai clan were willing to give them face. Once it had risen to a 2nd heaven or 3rd heaven celestial king tier level force, what was a mere Alchemy City worth? So what if alchemists had outstanding status? They could all be captured and forced to concoct alchemical pills. Just see how many alchemists would actually have the backbone to refuse. You are really too unconscientious. It's not enough that you grope another's feet as a man, you even spout threats of wanting to kill others to keep the secret from leaking to hide your own ugly actions. You truly are exceptionally shameless, Ling Han said carelessly. Shang De couldn't help but fly into a thunderous fury, stretching out his hand to grab at Ling Han. You are seeking death! Chapter 1912 How could you possibly be an alchemist? Chapter 1912 How could you possibly be an alchemist? Shang De was a holy son of White Sun sect. Though he wasn't outstanding or unique as Xianlu, the fact that he managed to become the holy son of a 6th heaven celestial king tier level sect meant that his natural talent in cultivation naturally could not be doubted. If he really had any weaknesses, then he was just a little bit of a Casanova. But what man was not a Casanova? He moved in fury. Boom! A fiery flame surged out of his body, turning into multiple immortal beasts. Each immortal beast was formed from patterns of great Tao. In comparison, Zhao Qifeng was practically trash. Ling Han's figure moved, primarily focusing on evasion, calling out loudly as he did. As a great holy son, it is not enough that you take advantage of others, you want to kill others to keep the secret from leaking. This shout instantly drew the eyes of a great many. Some of them even bore expressions of great disdain. They did not know the heads and tails of the story, but had only seen that Shang De had indeed been holding on to Ling Han's feet. This was really a strange fetish. Shang Da's face immediately flushed red. He knew that those with a little intelligence would not believe rumors. As long as one had a healthy brain, they would know that he, Shang De, liked women. How could he possibly grope a man's feet on purpose? But now, with so many eyes looking at him strangely, he could not calm himself no matter how hard he tried. You damn brat, I am going to kill you! He roared, easily angered by Ling Han. This person, was he really the holy son of the White Sun sect? Everyone looked at Shang De, who was repeatedly bellowing angrily, their eyes filled with suspicion. How could a holy son, and one that had not come from an ordinary celestial king tier level force, but from a 6th heaven celestial king tier superpowerful force, be so easily angered? Heavens, how could this kind of person possibly become a holy son? How could they possibly know that Ling Han's mouth could even drive a celestial king to fume with rage, what more a holy son? However, everyone soon showed expressions of shock. This time, it was not because of Shang De, but rather Ling Han. This young man was very strong. Though he had been dodging all this while, it had to be known that being capable of dodging and not countering at all, and still managing to ensure he himself was completely unharmed, was something whose difficulty level far surpassed merely parrying an opponent's blows. Which also meant that Ling Han's true strength was definitely not inferior to Shang Da's, and had even surpassed his. Heavens! How could this be? Very soon, they recognized him. Ling Han was the holy son that had been selected this time from Alchemy City. But what kind of place of Alchemy City? Setting aside the fact that it was just a 4-star force, even if it was a 1st heaven celestial king tier level sect, how could it possibly compare to the White Sun sect? Moreover, shouldn't the holy son of Alchemy City be an alchemist? They had thought that Xianlu only prized Ling Han's natural talent in alchemy. This was not strange. Xianlu had not advanced to the celestial king tier yet, and had use of Ling Han. However, only now did they know that it turned out that Ling Han's strength in cultivation was also astonishingly strong, capable of being their equal, or even stronger than that. They could not accept this. They were a group that were born prodigies in cultivation, and actually could not compare to an alchemist. Fuck! At this moment, they were more united than ever before. They all hoped that Xianlu could defeat Ling Han. Otherwise, they would also feel ashamed. However, no matter what kind of celestial techniques Xianlu used, he could do nothing to Ling Han, and what depressed him even further was the fact that while he and Ling Han had already exchanged almost 100 moves, the truth was there had yet to be solid contact even once between the two of them, aside from the very beginning, when he had accidentally gripped Ling Han's feet. Tui. Do you just know how to dodge and hide? Xianlu tried to provoke him. You're as cowardly as a mouse. I really have no idea why you are even cultivating. In any case, it is not for the sake of groping men's feet, Ling Han retorted smilingly. When Xianlu heard this, his fury immediately rose up again. You still dare say it, you still dare to say it, I will kill you. In his hands, multiple celestial techniques were channeled, changing into the channeling of great Tao. He was indeed deserving of being an heir that a sixth heaven celestial king tier level sect had focused on nurturing. If Zhao Qifeng had exchanged blows with him, the former would definitely have fallen into a disadvantage within 100 moves. If it had been a duel to the death, he would definitely have died within 1,000 moves. In simpler words, his battle prowess was about the same as the Empress. Too bad, the person he had encountered was Ling Han. Even if Xianlu suppressed his cultivation level to the fourth severance, it would be still undecided who would win in a clash with Ling Han. Xianlu had been born on the celestial path, and this was indeed very awesome. However, Ling Han was not ordinary either. He had two source powers of heaven and earth, and also had an amazing technique that was at least at the 9th heaven celestial king tier's level, like the indestructible heaven's scroll, and finally, he had been tempered by celestial king tier flames, making up for the final shortcoming of his physique. He was completely not inferior in any way to the highest grade Holy Sun. Xianlu was already not enough. Ling Han sighed. He initially only wanted to use Xianlu to temper himself, but the height that he was standing at presently was a little frightening. Even the air that had been nurtured by a sixth heaven celestial king tier sect could not give him the slightest bit of pressure. Little Dada, you are a little weak. He was speaking honestly. If the other's strength was close to his, then the two of them could engage in a brilliant battle with their full efforts. Who knew, it might help him to push open the doors to the fifth severance. Xianlu was stomping mad with fury. This guy actually dared to mock him. He really didn't know what the word death meant. You asked for this. His right hand shook, and a silver spear about 3 meters long appeared in his hands. Immediately, a murderous aura rippled out, which was very terrifying. Ling Han's expression also changed slightly. He could sense that this spear had the ability to wound him. The precious spear might be at the dividing soul tier's level. Even in the hands of a fourth severance, it could not unleash its full might, but it was still incredibly sharp, and could pose a threat to even his physique. Quite interesting. Ling Han was interested now, his eyes shining. It's not just interesting, it's going to send you on your way. Xianlu was completely unreserved. So what if he was the holy son of Alchemy City? If he was killed, he was killed. He did not believe that Alchemy City would dare charge to the White Sun sect and demand an explanation. That would only be seeking their own humiliation. Shwa, the silver spear flourished like a silver dragon, and it shook the skies. One by one, patterns of great Tao on the spear's body danced, tearing rips into space itself. This definitely was not a pseudo-celestial tool that was Yang soul or Yin soul in level, but rather something even stronger than that. It was fine even if Xianlu could not unleash the full might of the pseudo-celestial tool. The grade of this spear itself was too high. If one was even touched by the patterns on it, even one with Ling Han's physique would just barely be able to withstand it. Having lacerations would only be a matter of course. Though Ling Han was not afraid of the other's strength, he did not dare underestimate this pseudo-celestial tool. Immediately he, too, drew the divine demon sword, slashing out at the silver spear. One! The two precious tools clashed, releasing a thunderous sound that was strong enough to shake the galaxy. The rocks around all floated about 3 meters in the air, and then rapidly turned against the power of gravity to shoot at the skies, gathering into a black and dense tornado. Shang Da's whole person was also sent flying. The silver spear in his hands was extremely frightening, but his own strength was greatly inferior to Ling Han's. In a head-on confrontation, it was naturally impossible that he could be a match for the other party. Seeing this scene, everyone's expression shifted. Though they had guessed that Ling Han's strength could possibly be even stronger, they could ultimately only believe it now that they had witnessed it with their own eyes. Fuck, how could he possibly be an alchemist? You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.